hell? All right, everyone. Notice we've got Oregon and Washington on the top shelf. Most of those helmet placements are random, but they mean something today. They mean something for one of the few times. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you all being here on a Saturday morning at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. And the big bomb dropped via Oklahoma and Texas in the summer of 21. Via UCLA, USC in the summer of 2022. Will this be the bomb that is dropped by Washington and Oregon and the Big Ten once again for a second consecutive summer here in 2023? We welcome everyone in here. My name is Mark. We cover college football here on a daily basis. We would appreciate if you would stop by, because we believe we do it better than anyone because of your engagement, participation, and the value that you bring. We are together the voice of college football, and we appreciate your time again. We have left the link in the live chat for you to join the show and discuss college football with us. First and foremost is the report that is coming out via Brett McMurphy of Action Sports Network has stated that Oregon and Washington have been, quote, vetted and cleared to join the Big Ten. So we do have the lines open, but I want to get some things out in the open and run through some things before we take any calls. So it may be 10 or 15 minutes before anyone joins the show, but please feel free. We would love to hear from you and take your comments and questions. So I produced a video, right after USC and UCLA joined the Big Ten almost 1 year ago. It's been almost 1 year ago, and within hours, maybe a day or two after USC and UCLA joined the Big Ten, I produced a video. USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon. This is what it would look like in terms of dividing divisions or pods in the Big Ten, and this is what the scheduling would look like. So this has been on the forefront of people's minds that believed that USC and UCLA would not necessarily join the Big Ten by themselves, that they would want partners on the West Coast, that the Big Ten may also want partners to the Northwest. There's a number of configurations we could go through in terms of the value of these football and athletic programs, the academics involved, and the TV brand of Washington and Oregon, Stanford, Cal, and others. But Washington and Oregon, much like what we've seen coming from other conferences at other times, and certainly the two most recent, Oklahoma, Texas, and USC, UCLA, they're a pair. They're rivals. They're in the same geographic location. Schools typically don't want to move conferences and move their athletic programs and incur a ton of travel and so forth without a travel partner or a rival, a connection geographically and in terms of their culture and their history and traditions. And that would be the case, of course, USC, UCLA, Oklahoma, Texas, and now Washington, Oregon. So keep that in mind as part of this being in play. Also keep in mind that nothing's official and this is a report by one respected reporter, Brett McMurphy, formerly at ESPN, again, Action Sports Network. I don't follow Brett McMurphy's work on a regular basis. I can think of stories that he has broken in the past that have certainly come to fruition. I can certainly think of other times in which he, like others, have hinted toward things or reported things that didn't come to pass. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that report was not credible. It may have fallen apart in regards to a deal or an agreement. So nothing set here regarding Oregon and Washington. So a few things to keep in mind here. As I have stated a number of times, this is not fact, this is not truth, this is perspective on my part, is that anytime I've been involved in negotiations or been reporting on or perceived, or in this case, observed negotiations, usually when there is one party that is the obvious weaker of the two parties that needs the other party, and the other party would just like to benefit from the agreement, but doesn't necessarily need the other party, then the further along that situation goes, then the weaker and more vulnerable than one of those parties becomes. So put the Pac-12 in one of these two categories and put the media rights holders, the media rights companies, in the other position. So when we talk about Apple and Amazon and everybody that's been rumored to be negotiating with the Pac-12, and it's been confirmed to be confirmed in terms of negotiations with the Pac-12, keep in mind that those companies don't need sports. They don't need certainly the Pac-12 or college football. This is going to be a new venture for them. So they can turn around and walk away and continue on their merry way doing their business. The Pac-12 needs a media partner, multiple media partners, both linear and in streaming. So they are in the more desperate, vulnerable situation and position. That's obvious. And the further that strings along, the more desperate the situation typically becomes. Not speaking to this particular situation in negotiations, but that is typical in negotiations, that there are two parties negotiating. Very rarely are both of them equal in their leverage. One of them has the advantage over the other. And this one, the Pac-12 has a huge disadvantage, and it grows by the day for a number of reasons. So this report comes out from McMurphy and Action Sports News. Okay. The other misstep that I've talked about with Kliavkoff, the Pac-12 commissioner, Pac-10 commissioner at this point, Pac-8 commissioner possibly very soon, would be that he didn't stake his ground with the linear networks immediately. He should have been able to, despite all of his public rhetoric about the strength of the Pac-12 and how proud they are of their conference and how valuable, and even he made some slight remarks, slighted the Big 12 at times. He should have been able to be smart enough, and maybe in private he was, to know that his was the weakest athletically and in terms of football in particular, and from a branding standpoint, to be the weakest of the five conferences. Therefore, he should have staked his ground. He should have staked his media rights ground and gone after those spots initially, instead of waiting, surveying the field, and then getting a gauge on how much his conference was worth. No, he should have went in there, and even if he would have been undersold in his mind, he would have staked his claim, and he would have taken up positions, inventory for these various networks. So that's easy for me to say now, but I also said it at the time. So what has caused this to come about, according to McMurphy and Action Sports News or Network, is that Washington and Oregon, and this is key in all of this, that Fox and NBC have surveyed the inventory, looked at the two schools, looked at their football programs, looked at how it would work in scheduling, looked at what they're worth versus what they're currently paying the Big Ten, and they have added value to the contract. So that's what this report stems on. That's at the core of this report, is that, and we've talked about this a zillion times on here, that the Big Ten and or the SEC would add, and possibly the Big 12, would add more schools if they assess increased value. I think that there's two reasons why the SEC or the Big Ten would add more schools, and that would be they just flat out assess more value. Okay, just from a strictly monetary standpoint, we can get more out of them. Notre Dame is obviously the prized possession here that the Big Ten would well, all the conferences, the ACC included, of course, to try to stabilize their situation going forward in the next 10 or 12 years. But for the Big Ten in particular, to add Notre Dame, that's what they call a no-brainer, because they add more value than the average school in the Big Ten. Therefore, the media rights deal would increase, and then there's all the other benefits. But with every other football program is what we're looking at here, but the entire package of athletics and everything that goes along with it, these conferences assessing what is the value of this particular school, and will the media rights holders increase that value to justify the addition of the school. I don't think that's all of it. I think that there can be added value to gaining a football program and a athletic program and a school in your conference, and even lose a little bit of money initially in terms of the tangible money, the contract, and the way it's sliced and distributed to all the members, to actually lose money, but assess the situation as we're gaining value. That's probably not the case here. It seems as though Oregon and Washington, because of what Fox and NBC have mapped out with the Big Ten to say, add these schools, and this is what we are willing to increase the contract by, that it makes sense financially for the Big Ten. That's what it appears to be. Also consider that once USC and UCLA joined the Big Ten last summer, that it was within 2 to 3 months that the reports were confirmed that Oregon and Washington applied for membership to the Big Ten. Then there was much speculation as to why the Big Ten waited, why the Big Ten did not initially move. There's a lot of things in play here. I don't believe that the Big Ten wants to be perceived as a conference that is basically the impetus for the destruction of another conference. So I think that's part of it. Change in commissioners, that could be part of it as well. Kevin Warren, the outgoing commissioner, maybe if it would have been done under his watch, would have been given even more credit. And then the Big Ten new commissioner, and the perception of his effectiveness, his authority, his ability to make big moves would be greatly depreciated in value versus his predecessor, who struck a deal with USC and UCLA, Oregon and Washington, and CBS, NBC, and Fox to go forward with an NFL model schedule. That would be a lot to follow for the new commissioner, Tony Petitti. Though possibly they saved this for this to go on the record of Tony Petitti. That could be in play as well, because there's no football being played right now. There's a long off season. It's the longest in sports, and there's time. And especially, of course, since this is not happening until, with USC and UCLA, 2024. I don't want to speculate on when Oregon and Washington would join. Maybe it's 2024 to make it one big move. There's all sorts of stuff that we could speculate on in regards to the fallout of the Pac-12 and the Big 12, and what the Big 12 could possibly gain by the Pac-12 dissolving, shrinking, all of those things, what the Pac-12 could look like going forward. I think that there's so much more involved for the Pac-12 to maintain itself. And I believe that even though this seems like a death knell for Pac-12 football and athletics, I don't necessarily believe that that's the case. And then there's still a reported, and you may believe confirmed, dealing between the Pac-12 and ESPN at a much reduced rate, but to broadcast or broadcast/stream 1 to 2 games per week and maintain that window. We can go into all sorts of scenarios regarding what this means for NBC in particular, but also Fox and CBS and broadcasting these Big Ten games, and then getting more inventory. We think West Coast and we think late night, but also consider they're playing mid-afternoon games, which become primetime games on the East Coast. Okay, so much to get through, and I've got so many other notes because this hit me about 45 minutes ago. So thanks to my friends out there who have contacted me, because I knew nothing about this. I don't track these people on a regular basis multiple times a day. So this is people contacting me to say this is going on. So I've not gone through the reports. I just made sure that we are obviously giving credit to those making these reports and citing this accurately, and then going forward with all sorts of speculation about how this could play out, if it's going to play out. And again, this is not confirmed in regards to it being a done deal. All right, let's go to the phone lines. We've left the link in the chat, so please join the show to talk Oregon, Washington to the Big Ten. First on the line, we've got our buddy Tony Altamore joining us this morning. Tony.
Hey, how you doing?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
Good, thanks. Hey, I don't want to take away from good discussion, but I thought I'd throw up just a couple of data points and reflect back on what we talked about a year ago when USC and UCLA joined. And I think one of the core issues that folks are forgetting here, and I don't know who Brett McMurphy's talked to. He certainly has passed on a lot of the nonsense that's coming from the Big 12. I know the Big 12 fans would really like this to happen. But one of the things that I think we should talk about is the difference between qualified and being invited. You know, it's sort of like when you think about, like job applicants, like, is this a person that's qualified to be in this job? Like, are they qualified for these interviews, or are they going to be the person that we hire? So we talked when USC and UCLA joined, and you guys know I remain surprised that the Big Ten at the time did not also take Cal, Washington, and Stanford. And as far as qualified goes, certainly these conferences are always looking at institutions and doing scenario analysis and all that. And I don't think there's any question, and there hasn't been any question, there probably hasn't been any question since 1994, that both of these schools would be highly qualified for the Big Ten. And I've got some, I pulled up our charts from our deep dive and quickly set them for you for Washington and Oregon. We can look at them. But the question is, the Big Ten's Council of Presidents and Chancellors has been quite clear that neither of these institutions were under consideration. And we know that the valuations were incredibly dilutive. So yes, we know they add value. They're great schools and they have great big audiences. The Big Ten has to date been tremendously clear in not thinking that these were schools that they were going to add. But just to show you guys how qualified they are, I mean, Washington's one of the best schools in the country. Oregon is much more of like a fit in the Big 12 academically. Culturally, they are very much in line with the Pac-12, and culturally would be fine in the Big Ten. Academically, I don't know that they meet the Big Ten's bar, which is why we talked before about how in 2022 about how if the Big Ten were ranking these, Oregon would not probably be one of their leaders. So this is taking a look at the average of the main three academic rankings. You can see again, Washington, you see the Big Ten line. Washington is right in the middle of the Big Ten. Oregon is just slightly above Nebraska. But I mean, Washington is a great school with great history, and certainly would meet any bar of any conference. I don't know why the Big 12 people don't put their fake rumors on them. Here's athletic department success. You see Washington is right there, kind of equivalent with, this is NACDA points, so like the Director's Cup, so all sports points for the last 2 years. Washington is right there, kind of with Minnesota, right in the middle of the pack of the Big Ten. And Oregon is right next to them. So they both have, tremendous athletic departments, as we know. Looking at football history, Washington also very, very much in line with great Big Ten teams. They're a little higher than Michigan State, kind of behind UCLA, but ahead of like Michigan State, Iowa, and Wisconsin. And then Oregon follows slightly beyond them. So football history wise, I think we could put Oregon, between Iowa and Purdue as far as the Big Ten goes. So again, qualified, yes, but are they on the Notre Dame level? Would they actually make that offer? I don't know. So this is that chart that we love of athletic success going up and academic rank going to the right. And you see the Big Ten is the blue. And you see Washington, as we've talked about for a year, right in the middle of the Big Ten. Oregon is right in the middle of the SEC and the Big 12. Again, I just don't know that they would be a top pick. It's like a job applicant. Like, are they qualified? Yes, they are both absolutely qualified. But in all honesty, would you want them? Would you want Arizona or Arizona State or Colorado over Oregon? Maybe. Would you want Cal or Stan? I mean, remember, these are folks that have turned down Cal and Stanford, who you can see are superior athletically and academically. And they have very much turned them down, as well as very much turned down Washington and Oregon. So what has changed? I don't know that anything has changed. Because we heard the chairman of the Big Ten quite clear on that. The Big Ten is also super big on research. It's a big deal to the Big Ten and how they integrate their research. I know BYU and Baylor fans don't like to talk about that, but it's real important to the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. And you can see Washington would be, I think, third in the Big Ten behind Michigan and Johns Hopkins. So if you don't count Hopkins, they're second. Washington, tremendous research school, tremendous institution. Oregon, on the other hand, would by far be the last in the Big Ten. They are about half of Nebraska, less than half of Nebraska, about a third of Nebraska or something, who is the last in the Big Ten. And, you can see here, this is just research spend. Washington second in the Pac-12 behind Cal. Again, they're right there between Michigan and UCLA. Phenomenal. There's no question Washington is a phenomenal school. I just don't know that anything has changed, and we could find out. We could be wrong, but certainly the Big 12 fans, if wishing made it so, they would love it. But I mean, we've had multiple Big Ten presidents say we are not looking for anything dilutive.
So Tony, what might be new in this report?
Yeah,
this is a guess on my part, and this was a path I was going to go down and have not yet, was exactly that terminology, vetted and cleared. So just to be clear to everyone out there, and this is just an understanding because these terms can be used in a very number of ways, but based on my experience in corporate life, I'm in your category in regards to what this has meant in situations I've been involved with. This doesn't mean, it sounds like, okay, vetted and cleared, we're taking them. No, it simply means, you can have a number of applicants. You could have 12 applicants for a job and you have vetted their backgrounds. You've cleared them in regards to checks on certain qualifications and requirements, but that doesn't mean you're going to hire them.
Absolutely. Exactly. I think that's probably a great way to look at it. And certainly, I mean, in all honesty, if I don't work for the Big Ten, but if I did, I would say probably 10 of the I guess there's 12 or 8 of the Pac-10 right now would reach a vetted and cleared status with the Big Ten. Is this the institution that would we be okay with this institution? Would we be okay with their athletics? Okay with their leadership? Do they have lots of do they have shady boosters? Do they have,
And I'm guessing we're talking about Washington State and Oregon State.
Probably. Again, I love the Beavs. I love the Cougs. I literally just put a tweet up today celebrating the Cougs. But I don't. And the Cougs, by the way, Washington is much more tied to Washington State than they are to Oregon. Repeatedly throughout history and very politically today as well. And I don't think the Big Ten would be interested in Washington State. Now, again, if the Big Ten offered to Washington, I think they would take it, which is the same thing that they did in 1958 when Dr. Odegaard came in as president and the Pacific Coast Conference was still in existence. USC, UCLA, and Cal had quit, and they were going to form the new PAC. And Washington State and it was going to be, they were going to add in Stanford, San Jose State, and Air Force were actually the original 6. And Washington said, nope, we want in on that. And Washington dropped Washington State and Oregon State like a hot potato and joined the new PAC, leaving everybody else. So would Washington dump everybody? So if you guys remember on last year on what was that, Mark? July 2nd, I think we did the show about USC and UCLA joining. And we talked about how Washington would be incredibly attractive to the Big Ten, more so I think than Oregon. And so it would not surprise. I would not be surprised if they did want Washington. What I would be surprised about is the presidents have told us they looked at it and said no. So, is Brett basing this on some kind of, again, I don't know what he's basing it on. Is he basing it on some kind of a new look that says, it's like companies with M&A targets, like you mentioned, or hiring people. You might say, okay, we're not going to hire anybody right now, but if we did, these 10 people would be okay.
Again, I'm speculating here that this report that I've not gone through, I have only followed up on people contacting me in the last 45 minutes to say, hey, this has been reported, look into this. And I've just been able to gather up some things, just wanted to be able to give proper credit and so forth. But yeah, just latched onto that term vetted and cleared. So my thought is,
I think you're totally right on that,
I'm completely wrong, that Washington, Oregon applied last fall. Maybe they were cleared within a few months. Who knows at what point they were cleared, but it's now being confirmed and discovered and then confirmed by this particular reporter that they were vetted and cleared. And then anytime, as you know, that these reporters can confirm something, regardless of how much it really means to a final conclusion, they're going to report it because they've got a thread of information that other people don't have.
Yeah. And I would think you guys know, the other question would be, and this is sort of, which we talked about this a year ago, so this is nothing new to our Voice College football community. But if Notre Dame were to join the Big Ten, would they add another one? We talked a year ago and guessed that it would probably be Stanford. And I continue to think that Stanford is the one that I would look out for. Also, Stanford doesn't leak and Stanford doesn't talk. And you guys see Stanford is way on this chart. Like, this is the Big Ten's desirability chart. And Stanford and Texas are number 1 and number 2, depending on which axis you want. Michigan number 3 on both, or the other one on both. And so, yeah, if they needed to add another one to balance Notre Dame, Washington and Stanford would be the 2 that I think I would absolutely want. That said, Notre Dame has continuously turned down. Notre Dame has turned down the Big Ten, just like the Big Ten has turned down Oregon. So anyway, those are just some data charts. You guys can see Washington, where we don't have a Washington channel, so Washington's not in our deep dives. But Washington is as awesome a school as it gets, and they have a tremendously rich football history, tremendous success across sports. Going back to Boys in the Boat in the 1930s, tremendous fan base. They call their stadium, they call it the greatest setting in college football. Hard to beat Washington. I said a year ago, if the Big Ten would be smart to take them, it's just, we've been told by the Big Ten that they're not.
Tony, thank you so much for stopping by. Is there anything else you wanted to hit on?
That's it. I just thought we'd give a couple data points and, guys, take it away, because the dogs in the Big Ten would be pretty cool. By the way, also, I don't know that USC would vote yes in Oregon. Just a side point from the Trojans.
There's history.
There's history. All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Tony.
Bye-bye.
Tony Altamore, consultant and strategist, who has provided us with so much information, metrics, and way beyond that, insight into what it all really means. Please do not disregard what Tony has to say. He may not be right all the time. We cannot forecast the future. I'm wrong on a regular basis. Anybody who does anything close to this in regards to commentating on sports, on college football, if you're going to give your opinion, if you're going to give your perspective, you're going to be wrong at times. So that includes me. Anytime somebody hits me up for being wrong, I will say, okay, go find the person that's never wrong. I will say before we take this call coming in here that, again, right on the heels of USC and UCLA confirmed to the Big Ten last summer, I produced 2 videos in particular. There were a number of videos I produced, but 2 in particular that had a scenario of Washington, Oregon to the Big Ten, what that would look like in regards to formats of the conference, divisions and pods, scheduling, and so forth. Check it out. So we were, boom, right there, Washington, Oregon to the Big Ten. And another thought process and model in the direction that Tony was talking about, Notre Dame, Stanford to the Big Ten, what that would look like. All right, let's go to our buddy Larry's on the line. Larry, it's good to hear from you. What's going on?
Not much. How are you, Mark?
I am doing just fine. And wearing the colors proud, the block U, there it is.
Yeah. So what's really crazy, Mark, is I've been saying for a few months, and it's kind of making a little sense, is in my opinion, Washington and Oregon sabotaging the deal, any media deal for the Pac-12 would give them a clear path to the Big Ten. And so that's my biggest concern, is I don't know if Oregon and Washington are truly on board with the Pac-12. I really don't. I almost feel like Oregon and Washington stated to Kliakoff, this is the money and the exposure, get it, and that's it. Kind of one of those, knowing they weren't going to get the money or get the exposure, and set a unattainable goal for George. And I felt like Oregon and Washington don't really want to leave the Pac-12, but why would they want to stay in the Pac-12? Academically, they're fine going to the Big Ten, maybe even better off. So, and the other issue I have is Washington's Cossier, who I believe is also in charge of the Pac-12 Commission, is not coming out. I feel like George has been told to be quiet. And in his stay, the Washington commissioner has not, AD president, has not come out and tried to, level the boat out. You would think if you don't want George talking, somebody needs to come out and say, hey, we're doing this, we're doing that, settle down. But it's not happening. And so it gives me cause for concern. I'm not saying Washington and Oregon are going to leave, but I just don't see where they have any interest in trying to really keep the Pac alive. I don't disagree with Tony. I think the vetting happened a long time ago. I think their vetting's been cleared a while ago. And the reporting, also, I'm not knowledgeable. I've heard one show say that NBC and CBS was going to pick up the freight for Oregon and Washington. And if that's true, then I think you have some major cause for concern.
Yeah. So when it comes to what's come out of the mouths of important people, I'm looking at Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, those three in particular, and what their ADs and some chancellors have said since the end of the football season. And that's been a lot of, we believe, we hope, we have faith in media rights deal being done to our satisfaction, and leaving a door open to, you never know. There was a term thrown out there, it could blow up. So they have always, just like the Big Ten with their latest comments from Tony Petitti and from the chancellor at the University of Illinois, stating that this is not a priority at the moment. There's always been a this is not going to happen, or this is not on the front burner, but not in the moment, not a priority right now. A lot of conditions placed to where they could, cover themselves later.
Yeah, I don't know why the pot kind of settled down, and it's just kind of weird that something like this would come out at this moment. It's really stirring the pot a little more than normal, because I know San Diego State's timeline to give the Mountain West notification that they're leaving plays into this timeline a little bit. So tea leaves, I agree with Tony. I think the vetting doesn't mean they're going, but I just, like he's saying, there's a lot of quietness coming from everybody else in the other four schools that are really the four left in the Pac-12 that kind of were, built the Pac-12 along with USC and UCLA. in Oregon, Washington, Stanford, Cal. They're not coming out and saying anything. It's the new additions that are having to say, you know, hey, we're in this and that. So it should be some of the powerful talking heads coming out saying it. They're not. So in a world of business, why are the guys in the mailroom squawking and, you know, not the supervisors?
Well, I will say this, Larry, and we're talking about all these other schools and not your school because they're not at the core of this discussion, but obviously greatly impacted, is that in my learning about these various schools beyond the football, because I was well versed there, but beyond that, I've certainly gained a lot of respect for the status of Utah in regards to academics and their place in all of this and their rankings in various categories, because as you know, they're strongly positioned, and it may be a bumpy ride. It may not be the way they want to go, but they're going to land somewhere prominent. So they will be fine, as you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm worried, but I'm not. It's one of those situations where, yeah, I would like to hold on to a 5-7 year contract for the Utes, and maybe they can become a little more branded, a little higher up in demand. And, you know, that takes time to create that. And so I would like for that to happen, but if it was to all go down right now, I don't know if they would land anywhere other than the Big 12, because if Oregon and Washington left, I could see one or two of the other four corner schools possibly leaving. And if that happens, now you're really in trouble. And so I understand academically they really don't want to be there, but they also don't want to go back to irrelevance after fighting to get out of the WAC, to get into the mountain, and then finally the Pac-10 to go right back down. Nobody wants to get demoted. And I don't feel like the Big 12's a demotion, but I really don't know of any people that are clamoring to go to the Pac-12, the ACC, or the Big 12. So let's be realistic, folks. You know, everybody wants to be in the SEC or Big 10. So let's not all gloat about the Big 12, the ACC, or the Pac-12. Nobody's clamoring to get into those conferences.
Yeah, it's a haven of safety. It's shelter, basically.
Correct.
It's protection. It's
Correct.
okay, this is where we can land and be safe and still be relevant and in the Power 5 mix or the Power 4, whatever it turns out to be. Yeah.
Right. And so coming from a G5, and I don't know if anybody can view this. So the only time Utah got relevancy is when they played a Power 5 that was a decent team. Then they would get some talk, they would get some branding, they would get some promotion. Right now, as a fan, getting to play Washington and Oregon in the Pac-12 is going to have more promotion. It's going to have more branding than playing any team in the future Big 12. That's just the facts. And so to me, when you're playing the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Blue Bloods, you're going to be watched. Your branding, people are going to become aware of you. There's not a lot of people that have any branding left in the Big 12 or the Pac-12. So as a fan, I feel like playing Boise State is not the same as playing Washington or Oregon. It's not the same as playing Texas Tech as it's playing Washington or Oregon. So, you know, no disrespect to the Big 12, but let's be honest. Any team in the Big 12 that gets to play Oregon or Washington is going to have more exposure, more notoriety for a win in that.
Well,
Can you agree? Can you agree with that? Does that make sense?
Well, what makes sense, absolutely, is that, you know, from being on my show and from being on other shows and taking part in these conversations, we know what college football fans are hyper focused on, and that's that 14 playoff that's going to soon be a 12-team playoff. And it's further going to give a certain tier of team. I'll include your team, Utah. I'll include Penn State and other ones that have been on the periphery, this relevance again on a national scale. To us, they're relevant because we love college football and we love the entirety of it. But to the fan that's hyper focused, and that seems to be the majority, even though I would consider my crowd to be ardent college football fans, they're hyper-focused. You can talk the playoff every day if we really wanted to. So that's all they care about. So that's why this move is relevant. And this is why what you're talking about concerning the Big 12, and we just had a couple Big 12 guys on here the last week, and they did a phenomenal job. We had great conversations. Me personally will love the new Big 12 because of the competitive nature of the games, but most people will ignore that on a grand scale because those are not elite brands that will be vying for national championships.
Correct. Yeah, we view it the same, and it's no disrespect to the Utahs, the Baylors of the world. It's just, it is what it is.
It is, because most people don't view college football the way we do and don't embrace the competition and just really good, top 25 teams going at it. They are viewing what means something for the playoff. And even in this 12-team playoff, I think we're going to get to a point where some of those fringe contenders are a bit disregarded because, they can squeak into a playoff, but are they really a threat for a national championship? No.
Right. All right. Well, I just wanted to call in, and I'll give some other folks some of your time, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, Mark.
Have a good day.
You too.
Two really good calls as usual, because we've got Tony coming in as a consultant strategist. We are doing deep dives right now with Tony that every college football fan should pay attention to and really take in, because it gives just the granular look in certain respects. It gives obviously the broad scale look at the academics, the cultures, the history, and of course the athletics in the football. We have knocked out USC and Michigan. Check those out. It will be doing a deep dive on your favorite team, most likely very soon. And maybe Washington should be added to the list as well. Again, this is me conjecturing on this report from Brett McMurphy, because I have not looked at it. I've looked into it. I caught up with the phrasing that is the lead phrase, and that's that Oregon and Washington have been vetted and cleared by the Big Ten. And I am thinking that this report, so understand that these guys that are credible reporters that have been doing this for a long time, that have large followings, they're on Twitter all the time. They're on various shows. They have their sites in which they have been contracted to. Brett McMurphy, formerly at ESPN, currently at Action Sports Network. When they can confirm anything, they're going to report it, because they want to be first, and they want to be accurate, and they want to have their name and their brand attached to confirmed information. So that information could change the scope and the landscape of college football. That information may be completely true, but it may just be the next step towards something happening that never happens. Understand how many things need 8 steps to happen, and 3 of those steps actually take place. But in the long run, they turn out to be inconclusive, and they turn out to be meaningless because the other steps were not followed through on to make said event take place. Follow me on that? So they get confirmation on information, or they have a conversation with somebody and they can report somebody of consequence, somebody important, somebody in the decision-making process said this. Well, that doesn't mean that it's going to take place. That just means that that particular person said that this, or this could happen, or we've had these talks or these conversations, these negotiations, but that particular person is only one of dozens involved in the decision, or when it really comes down to it, a handful of people involved in the decision or making the decision, a number of people beyond that involved in the fact-finding and the conversations. So to make that clear about, you just don't read anything out there. That doesn't mean it can't be credible at the same time as it being in the end, at some point, meaningless. So both can be true. You can stumble upon information or something can be reported that's a credible source, that's credible, that's confirmed, but 18 other things need to happen. So while that has been confirmed, these other things have not been confirmed or not even been pursued and determined at this point for the end result to happen. And the end result in all of this are schools moving to other conferences. That's the only thing that means anything in all of this, is the actual movement of schools to other conferences. So think about in the last 11 years, we've had 4 schools, and they have yet to take place, but we have 4 schools confirmed where we have knowledge of those 4 schools moving to another conference in the Power 5. Now, because of those movements, well, let me correct that. Of course, the 4 schools that are moving into the Big 12. So we've had 8 schools now going into 2023 and then 2024, 8 schools that have moved conferences in the last 10 or 11 years. Okay, either from Power 5 to Power 5, or in the case of the 4 going to the Big 12, from Group of 5 to Power 5. But think about all the schools that have been rumored to have been moving during those 10 or 11 years. 30 of them. And that's not happened as of yet. All right, we will drop the link in the chat to invite your calls in here at the Voice of College Football. If you simply have a comment or question you would like to make, certainly jump in the chat. And I see all sorts of comments and questions flying by. Nothing necessarily of consequence, but if you've got something, it'll be highlighted and easy for me to find with a super chat contribution. Doesn't have to be anything of a huge amount or anything, but just much better. And you can support the channel in a number of ways. Hit the like button, even if you don't agree with me on a number of topics. And we released our Big Ten Power Rankings earlier today, so check those out. Big Ten Power Rankings were released actually late last night. I released those Big Ten Power Rankings. So if you enjoy what we do here at the Voice of College Football, and before I take these next calls, 2 calls coming in right now, let me promote what we've got coming up on Tuesday night. So Tuesday night, you may or may not know that May is Great Debate Month here at the Voice of College Football. Great Debate Month. We have already had 3 great debates involving, ironically, the Big 12 and the Pac-12 and realignment possibilities there. We had a Big 12 contingent come on as a debate in regards to the Big 12 pushback because they actually reviewed our Pac-12 Big 12 debate. And so we gave them the platform to come on here, and Cody and Jason were phenomenal and have since had other appearances on here. So we appreciate Cody and Jason jumping on here, and we will have them back because they are knowledgeable college football guys. And then our third debate was with Rick and Aya on the 10 most dominant programs of the 60s and 70s and who is number 1. So check out those debates. It is Great Debate Month here at the Voice of College Football. So coming up on Tuesday night, we are going to look back at the Clemson-Ohio State 2019 playoff game that went down to the wire, of course. Great game, classic game, controversial calls all over the place. And we are going to watch the game together. We're going to watch it, review it, look at the controversial plays, and we're going to have a great debate between the Clemson side, the Ohio State side, 2019 college football playoff game. We will be sending that link out to our YouTube members and to our Patreon members because it involves video. There's going to be a copyright placed on that here on YouTube. So we are taking that behind the wall. We hope that you will join us, but we will make that link available to our YouTube members and Patreon members. Thank you so much for being a part of our Voice of College Football community. Let's go to our next caller, McD Sports. Welcome into the Voice of College Football, sir.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing well. What's going
So,
on?
I do want to congratulate Oregon and Washington on the what's going to take place in the future. I do think they will be part of the Big Ten
Okay.
as early as 2024.
All
It
right.
might be 2025. There might be a year there, but I think we're heading down the road that they're going to be joining the Big Ten. Those two institutions. And the reason why I think that is because the Pac-12 does not have a TV deal in place. So overall, I do think that that the Pac-12 is going to go bye-bye. I've been saying this the whole time, as you know, but I think this is just one step closer to that. So I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, my thoughts are that Oregon and Washington applied for membership to the Big Ten last fall. So obviously, I think there could be a number of incentives for them to do that. Number one, the Big Ten is one of two conferences where everything is happening, the future of college football and the power of college football. So that's obviously why would you not? You see yourselves as now with USC and UCLA gone as the two preeminent programs in the Pac-12, and you see a conference that's on shaky ground. Why not apply for a conference that is like-minded and very close in a number of respects to what you're currently doing in the Pac-12. So they took that initiative. So obviously they would take an invitation or an acceptance from the Big Ten. I don't think that's there's no question about that. There's just too much benefit to that. There's really no con to that except for leaving the West Coast and having to work out logistics and issues with travel and those sorts of things, and leaving your tradition and your history behind with all these other programs. But besides that, in terms of everything we could name that's pretty obvious regarding football, regarding brand, regarding money, everything, and your relevance in the sport going forward, you leave the Pac-12 for the Big Ten. So they already made that move. What we didn't know was whether the Big Ten accepted them or what the Big Ten was doing, because all we heard out of the Big Ten was basically, and not directly from the Big Ten, was that the Big Ten had put up a big kind of yield sign, we'll call it, like a yellow sign to say, we've not accepted you, hang on, we'll see. And I gave some speculation as to why that could have been a number of times, but including about 45 minutes ago, of what the Big Ten strategy could be there. Okay. So your next thought is asking me about the future of the Pac-12?
So I don't think the Pac-12 has a future. I don't. I think it's just gonna disappear. And to piggyback on I think it was one of the previous callers saying there isn't saying the Big 12 might be a downstep. I disagree completely. If you
I
look at
don't
the
think
past
anybody
few
said that.
years,
Go ahead.
well, he made it sound like it's not like joining the Big 10 or SEC. I agree with that, but if you look at the Big 12 last year, TCU made the playoffs. You had Cincinnati, who's a Big 12 team, make the playoffs. If you look at how the teams that made the New Year's Six bowls, in the new Big 12, the Big 12 is going to be fine, in my opinion.
Oh, they're going to be fine. They're going to make money and play football. They're not going to compete for national championships. I am on record as saying, if I want somebody to come on with some kind of challenge or bet for me for the next 10 years. If a Big 12 team wins a national championship, I will do blank.
I don't have the balls to do that.
Okay. Because the Big 12 is not winning. And I don't say this in a disparaging way. I just tell the truth or tell my perspective on what it is. I love the Big 12. I'm going to love watching the Big 12 with BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF. I think that's tremendous, where we have no idea who's going to win these games, how good they're going to be. All the way to the bottom of the conference are, I'm not going to call them quality football teams, but even the worst teams in the Big 12, unless things change drastically, are going to be better than the Rutgers and Northwesterns and Vanderbilts of the world. So it's going to be a quality conference from top to bottom. Problem is, Most people don't care about that. They care about who's elite and playing for national championships, and none of those teams will. When is the last time the Big 12 won a national championship with its remaining schools?
You gotta go
They
back.
haven't. They really haven't. Before, we'd have to go back to close to like World War II.
I mean, the closest one I could think of with their current schools is Cincinnati, TCU this past year,
Yeah.
and West Virginia in 2007,
Yeah, they've come close.
and Kansas in 2007 as well. But I mean, you look at I think the Big 12 is going to be fine, but overall, I do want to get your perspective. Do you think the ACC is in trouble? Because I think they are in a lot of trouble right now.
Let me first answer or give my view on something that you alluded to before about the Big 12, comparing the Big 12 and the Pac-12. You're looking at it strictly from a football standpoint. That why would the Pac-12 losing USC and UCLA and now possibly on the cusp of Washington and Oregon be looking down at the Pac-12? And why would anyone say that they're better? I believe if those comments were made by the first two callers, they were talking about holistically, everything included, institutions, other athletic programs, all of it, that the Pac-12 was a superior conference to the Big 12, everything included. You're talking about football. So I just wanted to make what I believe that clarification is.
Absolutely.
Okay. In terms of the ACC, okay, let me extend on that point to say what I believe is at the crux of this entire, for anybody that's logical out there, there's a lot of crazies out there that just love the Big 12 and want to see them, hoard the Pac-12 and all that, and people that love the Pac-12 and just want to hang on to what they have, and maybe they root for Washington State and they don't want to see it crumble. And I get that, they're fans, but we're trying to have a logical discussion about what's real. And the crux of what I can't completely determine. So I could get on here and pretend that I know a lot of things, but I don't do that. So what I don't know is we've got an athletics side and we've got an academic side. Now there's a zillion other things involved with culture and relationships and other athletic programs, but let's just really size it down to football, rules, athletics, and then you got everything involved with academics. What I can't answer is what is the percentage weight given to either one? Because if you just look at money and you believe that that entire school goes along with whatever decision is made to join another conference, then all that academic money, regardless of the university, dwarfs what's going on in football. We're talking about billions of dollars in endowments and research and all of that. It completely annihilates everything on the athletic side. It's not even close. So if you believe in these institutions making decisions based on the whole picture, then you believe that the academics play an enormous part in this. And for anyone that would discount that, understand that any time of what we consider a football team moving to another conference in the past, it's always made academic sense as well. So Nebraska joining the Big Ten was a huge, of course, it was done for football reasons, but that had a huge impact academically for Nebraska. They were joining, the Big Ten is second only to the Ivy League in regards to academic standing. So this is going to answer the question that I have at the crux of this. Is it all things taken into consideration, or do these schools say, we're going to continue being who we are academically, and we can change whatever relationships we need to change, but we are going to make $18 million more per year playing football over a 10-year contract, so we're going to make that move. And even though we don't like leaving, and it changes a lot historically and in terms of relationships and academically, it makes sense just in terms of athletics and football. So we are making that move. I can't answer that question.
Fair enough.
When it
Um,
comes to the ACC, the big crux of that conversation is, of course, the grant of rights and whatever you believe about that. Do you believe it's ironclad? And as it's been explained to me, ironclad in a very clumsy way, where it's a very loosely worded contract to where it's difficult to fight. Therefore, it's going to be difficult for these schools to leave unless they can gather enough of them together. I believe the number is 8 to bolt at the same time and collectively get all that agreement from 8 schools to dissolve the grant of rights agreement and leave.
so
Because the amount of money that it's going to cost any one of those schools to leave is enormous. Even though they would make so much more money joining, let's say, the Big Ten, they would be making like 80 or 90 million dollars per year compared to 35 or 40. So of course that's a lot of money, but we even need to multiply that, because you're talking about, that's going to continue on and on and on. So if you're losing $50 million, if you're Florida State, as their AD met with the Board of Trustees about a month ago and said, this is a real problem. We're a championship level program. That's what we strive to be. How can we compete against teams in the Big Ten and the SEC making the money we do? Because it's not just the 30 million versus 80 million this year. It's that plus the next year and the next year and the next. And after 10 years, that 50 million is 500 million. And all the things you can do if you're smart, and these people are smart, with $500 million, you can make that billions of dollars with investments. So these problems for these schools in the ACC is real. And even if the ACC can keep that and hold that conference together until 2036 with that grant of rights, I would love to know what their strategy is once they get to that finish line to try to keep all that together, to keep those teams and those schools and those athletic programs that have been pissed off for 10 or 12 years saying, look at what's going on in the Big Ten and the SEC, and we are bound by this. They're not going to want to keep that partnership. I don't see it. So the ACC, it's strange. And it's the last thing I'll say before I cut you loose is on whatever you want to respond to. What's strange is, and I said this from day one of all this coming down last summer, is that the Big 12's in an interesting place because they're saved by their mediocrity. Nobody wants those schools. The Big 10 doesn't want those schools in the Big 12, and the SEC doesn't want them. So they're saved by their mediocrity. And I say that again with all due respect, but that's just the way it is. Versus the ACC, they are vulnerable because they have attractive schools. And when I say schools, I mean football programs. Clemson, Florida State, Miami, to a lesser degree, North Carolina, Georgia Tech's a great school, and they can win in football. It's only been 5 years since they were viable in football. So the ACC, to me, has more attractive commodities than the Big 12, but because of that, they're in trouble.
So, I heard everything you said, and I do disagree a little bit. For what I've seen, the ironclad, I do think the way I read everything, I do think there is a few loopholes for these schools to get through. The way I read it,
Well, I'm not saying it was ironclad. I'm saying some people will tell you, and some
yeah,
of those people are lawyers, will tell you that it's ironclad. I'm
okay,
not saying that. I'm not a lawyer.
right. But overall, I look at the ACC. I agree. Basically, those schools are more attractive. Now, as a fan, as a Big Ten fan, because I'm a Man with Terps fan. That's the conference my team is in. Which, by the way, Manwell looks very smart getting out of the ACC right now. When they did, um, I only want one school from the ACC as a Big Ten fan, and that's Miami. That will be the one I will want.
Why would you only want one? I don't think they want to come by themselves. They would, because it's such a better league and because they would be saving their school, but I don't think they want to. If I'm the Big Ten, I go after Florida State and Miami. I'm on record of saying that for a long time.
I know.
The recruiting gains, that's the only thing the Big Ten doesn't have. They don't have enough football players. That's all they need. They got plenty of fans. They got plenty of alumni. They got plenty of money. And they got plenty of brand. And they got all these TV deals. And they are basically a mini NFL in terms of a TV deal. That was smart by Kevin Warren or whoever orchestrated that behind the scenes that handed it to him.
Yeah.
But the Big Ten doesn't have enough football players.
I agree with that, but the reason why I say Miami will be the clear-cut number one school I will go after. I know some people are saying North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia Tech, which I think Georgia Tech will be interesting. But the reason why I say that is Miami fits the quote-unquote academic standard. I think they are a better fit in the Big Ten than the SEC. I do. Because because I think Notre Dame's going to end up in the Big Ten eventually, one way or the other. And they'll have Notre Dame, they'll play Michigan and all those, and Ohio State and all those schools. But you look at Miami, I just feel like Miami should be the number one school in the ACC out of any of those schools to get, in my opinion. I don't think it's Florida State. I don't think it's Clemson. I think Clemson is a perfect fit for the SEC. I don't think it's North Carolina, even though I could see North Carolina ending up in the Big Ten. Same thing with Virginia. I can also see Boston College ending up in the Big Ten as well, which that will actually probably be possibly number 2 or 3 on my list would be Boston College, just because of fit and everything. But overall, I just look at Miami, the history, everything. That would be the school I would want to go get from the ACC if I had a choice at one school, personally.
Well, I'm going to move on to some other callers because they're starting to stack up. But Boston College, in regards to a fit, I get it. I think geographically that obviously doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
But the Big Ten has showed that it valued. Now, this is 10 years ago, plus that Tim Delaney was going after TV markets, and Boston's a great TV market. But so I do believe, I'm kind of vetting that. I'm kind of reviewing that in my mind as it comes out of my mouth. Obviously, nobody in Boston or Massachusetts or that metropolitan area, and then you could extend that to Providence, Hartford, the New England area, cares about Boston College football. Very few people care. But are they going to care about? It's like when the Big Ten went into New York City because of Rutgers. Well, there are more alumni and fans of Notre Dame and Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State in New York City than Rutgers. But I think that that's a great connection. If Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State are going up to Boston College playing, then that becomes a whole different venue and environment and site. Shoot, they would come up and pack the stadium.
You made my point there. I was getting ready to say that. But Mark, as you say, yeah, calls stacking up. I'll let you go. Go Terps. I do want to talk about the Terps when I call. Whenever next time I do, go Terps.
I got a power poll out there, McD. You may want to check out where the Terps are.
I have to watch that video. I haven't got to it yet, but I will.
All right. Appreciate you.
Bye-bye.
Our guy McD, who's been calling for years and years and years and loves the Terps. Good to hear from McD. We got welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line here?
Hey, Mark, it's Mikey G is my handle.
Mikey G.
How's it going?
All right.
Yeah, man.
Good to see you. Thanks for calling. What's going on?
Yeah, no, so I'm one of those callers that chimes in like every year or two, I guess. And it's normally in the context of, something that's being like a narrative out there in the Twitter sphere or, through YouTube or whatever else. And this idea just keeps on popping up this whole offseason about this, the UW Oregon add to the Big Ten. And I think that the distinction that I think is missing in most of this conversation is that, I don't listen to the Big 12 at all. All that nonsense is just, it's misinformation, and it's basically they're trying to self-preserve is what I'll call it, as is the Pac-12. But I think that the narrative is that UW and Oregon don't add value to the Big Ten, and that's just pure nonsense. The math, as I understand it, is purely a dollars game, and the dollars are spoken for. So for Oregon to go to the Big Ten, you're talking about a pay cut to all the other programs, and you're getting Oregon and Washington at a discount. Now, does that make sense for anybody right now? Probably not. So I think that you see Oregon and Washington probably bide their time in a Pac-10, and then play their cards very strategically here in the next few years. And really, I think the other piece that a lot of people don't realize or ignore is the grant of rights with the ACC is the only thing that's keeping this thing from absolutely blowing up. Because if they weren't locked in until 2036, then it's just a free-for-all, and you get your Power 2 conferences, and that's the end game, right? And so that's why you have this bickering between the Pac-12 and Big 12, and it's fandom at its worst, really. Like you get a bunch of people that cite sources or whatever, and obviously Brett McMurphy is a credible source. I don't care what Tony says about him. The guy has the resume. I'm going to believe any information that he puts in that report. Now, does it really mean anything tangible? Probably not. And so I think the real issue here is that you add a Oregon and Washington, no question, the Big Ten becomes a better conference. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. They are gaining two of the top 15 programs in the country in football. Yes.
Yeah. So I think that fans they love to latch on to, whatever, piece of information that they have. It's all basically, a bias confirmation game. And that's much of the society that we live in right now anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Mikey, so, you bring up some great points, and I just want to respond to something you said there, because it would be very easy for me to make things up and have enough knowledge of the situation to make them up and make them sound good, like they're true, but I don't do that. Or I would be on here talking realignment every day. If I wanted my channel to blow up by any measure possible, then I would be on here talking realignment every day. Okay, you made a great point about Brett McMurphy in this report that I talked about 45 minutes ago, and that's a credible reporter. Anytime he gets information, especially in this world with social media where he can go directly to the public, can report that thread of information because he's got it. Nobody else at this moment has it. So why not report it? He's confirmed it. It's credible. That doesn't mean that that's going to lead to anything. That may just be one step out of 17 that have to occur for something to happen. But he is simply reporting the Big Ten is vetted and cleared Washington and Oregon. That's completely true. There it is. That doesn't mean anything's going to happen beyond that. Or now, or 3 years from now, we don't know. So that's an important point in all of that. In terms of the TV numbers, what I've always said, Mikey, was that let's say in this case, the Big Ten is reviewing Oregon and Washington and their added value. That would obviously be in a very tangible black and white, numbers game without obsessing anything else, just simply going to Fox, NBC, CBS and saying, we add these two schools, what are you going to give us? And then once we redistribute the pie, what's this going to look like? Is this adding $1 to anybody else in the Big Ten of our current member schools or not? I have said, I don't know what the answer to that question is. I don't know. And even if they would technically add value, meaning those three networks could assess it and say, yes, Oregon and Washington are worth more as a football brand than the average Big Ten school. So if you're doing the math, that makes sense. They're worth more than Minnesota. Therefore, they would add value to this count. But we don't want to commit to that. They could still make that assessment and say they do, But we are heading toward a recession. We have staked our ground. We're fine with what we have. We have plenty of games, inventory among good teams. They would technically add that, but we're not going to go there. And I've made statements like that I can't answer because I'm not making that decision.
Yeah, and so I think that my frustration stems from exactly what you're describing. Is that I think that when you're looking at it through whatever conference lenses you're looking through, it's very easy to say, well, all of the experts are saying that there's no value added. That's absolute baloney. There's value added. It's just that the money's spoken for, and that in terms of making these moves, it's a long-term investment. You're playing the long game in all of this. And if the Big Ten really wants to solidify themselves as a true contender, not just against the SEC, but for national titles, then you add Oregon and Washington. Now, I know a lot of the comments are probably going to blow up and say, Oregon, they don't have any national championships. What are you talking about? We've been twice in the last 10 years. One of them was Michael Dyer was down. I have to say it. But we came close. We almost beat Auburn in 2010, or I guess the game was in 11.
Overrated anyway.
Yeah. The problem is that we've been to 4 Rose Bowls, won 3 of them in the past 12 years. We've been to numerous bowl games and done very well. And so we are always in the mix. Now, do we have some kind of ground to gain? Absolutely. And when you put that combination into the Big Ten, it strengthens the Big Ten. And, maybe the presidents are making these decisions or their votes based on academics. But at the end of the day, if you want to increase your chances long-term to win national titles, then you strengthen your roster, or you strengthen your members. And I think that if the math and the dollars work out eventually, where these networks see that, and the contracts are, I guess, amended and tailored to the new inevitable structure of 2 Power 2s, that are 2 power conferences, then I think that you see something like this happen. Right now, it's just pure chaos, and that's why we're living in such, disarray, and fans get all worked up and they say this, that, and the other thing, and they're just, all of it's hyperbole. Like, we don't really know. Nobody really knows, and so you're wanting some sort of like solid ground to sit on. And just to kind of piggyback on what Larry was saying earlier, I don't want to leave the Pac-10. I love our conference has been phenomenal for my whole life. I'm in my 40s. And so to see that kind of dissolve and just disappear, it's heartbreaking. And for Larry, I mean, they're a new to the Pac-12, but they've been here long enough to be a part of that rivalry and a part of that tradition. So it is a painful thing to kind of watch as a fan in this whole, it's just a mess. So I guess, yeah, enough on that. I guess I wanted to kind of ask you more about your assessment of the ACC and how you think that they have. I think the way you phrased it was they're more attractive than maybe the big or the Pac-12 and the Big 12. Is that what you said?
They have more attractive football brands. They have more of them. It could be argued that at the high end that those 2 or 3 are more attractive, but they have a larger quantity of attractive brands.
Yeah, I think so. I'm just assuming that you're talking about Florida State and Miami being kind of the blue bloods that, in the past have really done well, but really Clemson is it, in kind of the more current state of things. Is that correct?
Well, yes. So certainly Miami has not done anything on the field of consequence for almost 20 years. Nothing.
Right.
But there's still a brand there that brings eyeballs to the TV set. They're still an attractive brand. And of course, the Big Ten cares about academics. It's a really good school. And being in Florida, being located in the state of Florida, I think means a lot more to the Big Ten than it would, let's say, the SEC. That's just more saturation for the SEC for their own recruiting footprint. But for the Big Ten to be able to drive a flag, a stake in Florida and say, we've got 2 schools here and we no longer have to come from the bitter cold of the Midwest and try to pull. And really the only one that's successful at it consistently is Ohio State. They're the only ones that can go to Florida and compete and get their share of players. Michigan is even getting leftovers from Florida. They don't get the top players from Florida. Ohio State's been the only one that's successful at that. But if you're now in a conference with Florida State and Miami, and yes, they have amazing football traditions, of course, and they also have really good schools in both of them. And somebody might be surprised to know that Florida State's running pretty much neck and neck and academically with Miami, that I think that those are 2 tremendous gets for the Big Ten.
Yeah, well, I can't really dispute that when you're comparing kind of the top of the pack, like we're talking the Utahs and the Washingtons and us, right? So,
Yeah.
I think resume wise, but I'd be curious to know eyeballs wise. I know that the Southeast is a fervent fan base and they generally tune in, but if you look at their stadiums, generally not the case. Rice Eccles does very well in Salt Lake, and as does Autzen. Now UW, I'll throw my jab in there. They don't sell out the way that Autzen does, but they certainly have a TV market, and so I guess I've just been kind of more focused on the TV contract perspective than I have been, or really specifically the numbers that they're getting in the TV ratings. And I'm curious if that measures up in terms of the ACC and Pac-12.
Well, if you get a chance, Mikey, check out a series that we posted about a month ago. We went through the ACC. We went through all the Power Fives in terms of their TV numbers from last year and tried to put it in perspective, because as you well know, just because one game gets 4.5 million, the other game gets 3.2 million, there's a lot that needs to be vetted out there. So it's not just, okay, these are the numbers.
Right. And I think it's a year over year thing too, right? Like when you talk about 4.2 versus 3.2, well, was there another competing game on at the time?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you just kind of have to look at the trend data, year over year. And I would expect, and in fact, I know last time I looked that Oregon's a perennial TV draw, and it doesn't matter if it's in conference or out of conference. If it's a marquee matchup like a UCLA versus Oregon in Eugene last year, I know that was a good time slot. They didn't get the big noon kickoff, but I think they still were around, the 2 million mark, even though there were other marquee games going on around the country. And so
we should define what you say by marquee TV draw. So compared to 90% of the country, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
You're comparing them to Ohio State, Michigan,
right?
Those teams.
No question.
No. Okay. So we'll put them out of the way, because they don't even matter, because they're not in this conversation. So we're talking about Miami, Florida State, Clemson.
Right.
So understand that there were a handful of games in the ACC that had higher total views than the highest, most watched game in the Pac-12, at least last season. And I haven't reviewed previous years, but I'm guessing that the Pac-12 had a banner year on television because the conference was much better than it's been for about 5 or 6 years. The number one game was USC and UCLA in the Pac-12. I think it had these numbers are fresh in my head because I've looked at them a zillion times. I think 4.55 million watched USC and UCLA. And then you had a strong collection of games, Oregon, Washington, we could name them, Oregon State, Oregon, Utah, et cetera, that were in the 3 to 4.2 million range.
Right.
And the ACC did not have a game reach 5 million, but they had a collection of games between 4.5, that high mark, USC, UCLA, and 5 million.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
So it's not
like
drastic,
I said earlier, with them,
just based on last year, the ACC, its top games. Now that's not going all the way through to the bottom rung, but its top games were slightly higher, slightly.
Right. Okay, Mark. Well, that's all I had. Just kind of talking about that disparity between value added versus TV dollars available.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
I
thanks.
appreciate it. Thanks, Mikey.
Yeah.
Take
Go
care.
Ducks.
Talking Washington, Oregon, and the reports coming from Brett Murphy and Action Sports Network. I have to continue to look down at my notes. Action Sports Network, not too familiar with them, but in regards to the report, again, the catchphrase, the one that's going to catch everyone's attention, and rightfully so, because I think this is the core of why it's being reported. And this is the new information that can be confirmed. And I think this, again, is the core of the report. Oregon and Washington have been vetted and cleared by the Big Ten. All right. Get that USC perspective from Tim. Tim, what's going on today?
Well, no, things are going well. I just want to say that,
geared up.
yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah.
No, Mikey, as always, does a great job.
Yes.
Bringing facts and talking sense, which is nice when it comes to Oregon fans. But it's the same thing with Larry. Both these guys have a great perspective, a perspective I usually don't hear from other conferences that are represented. And they bring a lot of facts. You're talking about two teams, Washington and Oregon, that both have been these are both playoff teams. These aren't just some random schools, right? And there's a lot of people running laps right now about how this person's wrong, how that person's wrong. Let's all hit the brakes as well, because this is just, they've been vetted, right, and cleared. There hasn't been a vote. Numbers haven't been talked about. So things are same. And also going back to what you said about the fact that people are trying to do victory laps saying how the end of the Pac-12, they got to remember the reason why the Pac-12 was folding is because major conferences wanted their teams. So if you're in the Big 12 and you're gloating right now, it's like, it is good to be safe, but you're safe because, well, nobody wants your teams. So this isn't a validation for any conference. It's been kind of a bit of Schadenfreude that the Big 12 has been doing. Like, we don't have the worst contract. Look at their TV contract and all that stuff. It's like, you guys got bigger fish to fry. And I think in the end, I think things will shake out. I think the ACC is the last really big domino. It's going to drop once that becomes, viable to pick up those teams. That's why I'm kind of curious about the fact that why the Big Ten is going to go in on this so quickly all of a sudden. Like they're like, no, we're going to hold off. Now all of a sudden they're going to go in. I mean, did something change? Like you said, those Florida schools, I think Clemson's probably a bigger fit for the SEC and eventually probably will be in the SEC as long as those other schools as well might be going to. But Brett McMurphy's also been kind of a Big 12 kind of guy. I mean, just a lot of the stuff's been coming out. It's been coming from him. Yeah. I think we all should take a pause. I think this is great. I think that Oregon and Washington would absolutely be great schools. I mean, selfishly for us, being two more West Coast schools. So even the overplayed travel problems USC is going to have would be that much easier. But I think we should wait because I think there's no purpose. It's not like the SEC is going to swoop up and grab Washington and Oregon. They're not going to the Big 12. So there's no major rush for the Big Ten to do this. And I think you point out the fact that there's probably not an immediate economic value added for the Big Ten to pick up Oregon and Washington. Mikey made a great point, but if you look in big picture, Pacific Northwest football, the footprint, it starts checking off boxes. Mm-hmm. I think that they're going to wait and see what options they have in the ACC before they go ahead and add more teams. The LA market with UCLA and USC's football brand, all of it makes sense for that move. Washington and Oregon of late have been really strong contenders as well. So they're very attractive, but there may be more attractive options like you kind of alluded to in the future. So as a business model, just think as a business, why would they jump the gun and add two teams when they're not in danger of losing those two teams? I don't think that Georgia and Alabama are going to sign off and flying all the way out to Seattle anytime soon. To Eugene.
Just think about any business model. If your business is in it, we're not talking about a business that's trying to survive. We're talking about a business that is rock solid, meaning the Big Ten. We're talking about a business that's rock solid and strong. And if you can, I am not the analogy guy, but if you can come up with an analogy of having this really strong business and being able to add this little entity to the side Not that Oregon and Washington are just little entities, but you can add to your business and it's going to gain you this much in the interim, but it really doesn't. It's really not in your big picture plan, but you see these other options falling into place down the road, and you're perfectly fine where you are. You're in great shape. Then you don't do that to make a few extra $1 million here and there. And I'm not saying that Oregon and Washington aren't great ads for the long-term future. The Big Ten's playing the long game. That's for sure.
And the gem of this whole thing, as much as some guy was calling it grandpa's team and really bright, insightful comments, he said, talk about Notre Dame. Notre Dame, for a number of reasons, isn't just grandpa's team, number one. But number two, that's the crowning jewel. And any conference, any SEC included, that could land Notre Dame is doing it tomorrow. So let's not confuse ourselves in the chat. And so if you think about that ad, if you add Notre Dame, who are two attractive ads as well? Miami, Stanford, instantly built-in rivalries as well. That could possibly be a draw. So I think people need to slow down, look at the bigger picture items. And I agree with Mikey, and I completely agree with Larry almost all the time. Both those guys are brilliant guys. Those two schools would be value added long-term for the Big Ten. It's just, I feel there might be some bigger fish out there that will likely be the targets for the Big Ten. That's all really I have to go on that. And I think that with that said, I do need to do a personal plug. Do you mind really quickly? Because
Absolutely. Yeah. We need to get this word out. People, listen up.
Yeah. So we're really lucky to have an opportunity to have one of the all-time greats in football, not just college football, but in football in general. And that's Anthony Munoz. Anthony Munoz is going to be joining our Trojan show, and that just changed. Actually, I just spoke to him this morning on the telephone. It will be June 4th. So June 4th. The short story is, I said, okay, I have this list of questions. I don't want to presume how much time you have for us. Whatever you could give us would be great. So these questions probably are about an hour, but obviously we could pare this down. I don't know what your schedule is. He said, hey Tim, you know what? An hour, we could do an hour. If it takes longer, we could take longer. We're fine. I mean, that's just the generosity that he's giving out. Truly an amazing athlete, but even a more incredible person. We're going to go into his childhood, some of the situations he grew up in a single parent household in LA, and going all the way through the fact that, we're talking about a man who obviously has the gold jacket on. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a NFL Man of the Year in 1991. All-century team, arguably the best left tackle and weak side tackle in college football of all time. But I'd say, yes, he is. But we're going to go into all these conversations with him. So if you guys are a football fan and you want to hear about, a fan of just people in general, this is an amazing person. Please take a few moments out of your Sunday on June the 4th to come by and watch an amazing man and hear about his story.
Awesome stuff. I can't wait for that. And for as much as I love college football, and USC is one of the very top of the elites, I will be listening intently. And I will also, if I'm given opportunity to ask a question, it will probably be about the NFL.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, we're talking about a man he's also like a Hall of Famer. He's in the Ring of Honor for the Bengals. Although they haven't retired his number, no one has worn his 78, since he wore it. So just amazing. Jonathan Ogden's up there as well. I've heard some of their names kicked around, but I know I have a bias, but I mean, I'm telling you right now, watching him dominate Hall of Famers on the other side is why you go, wow, this guy was something special in football. So please check it out.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's all I have for you. Good luck, Ducks. Good luck, Huskies. Obviously a value add, and I'm really excited about if that is the opportunity. It'd be better for us on the West Coast, but let's all hit the brakes because we don't know. It's just really some more news coming out of the Big 12. So bye to everyone, and I'll talk to you later, Mark.
And while we're in the promotional lane, we will remind you that coming up Tuesday at 8:30 Eastern Time, Clemson, Ohio State 2019 debate. So this is Great Debate Month here at the Voice of College Football. We've already served up 3 amazing debates. Check them out. They're on the live stream portion of the channel here. 3 debates last week. I won't go through them right now, but again, 3 tremendous debates, 2 of them involving what we're talking about right now. The next one involves watching some football. So this is going to be better yet in a number of ways. Clemson, Ohio State 2019 playoff game, controversial calls all over the place. We're going to debate it Tuesday at 8:30 Eastern time. That link goes out to our YouTube members and our Patreon members. So sign up on Patreon or YouTube, and understand you don't have to sign up for both. So we have taken great detail in making sure that you're not in a quandary. Do I sign up for Patreon or YouTube, and I only get this over here, and I got to sign up for both if I want to get this or that? No, you only need to sign up for one or the other. YouTube membership, the tier that involves exclusive content, and then also on Patreon, we're going to do a Clemson Ohio State deep dive on the 2019 playoff game. All right, next up here at the Voice of College Football, we've got our buddy Chris online. Chris, what's going on?
Hey, Mark.
How you doing?
Oh, good. How are you?
I'm doing just figuring out my audio.
Is it my audio? Can you hear me?
Hearing my audio or feed.
I don't know what the problem is then. Oh, you know what? Let me try again. I think I'm on you on another channel here. Hold on.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I'll take another call. Here we go. Let's move it on to Trey. Trey, what's going on?
Hi, Mark. I'm a first-time caller. I've been listening to your show since about 2021, and when I saw the news, I figured I'd give a call.
Awesome. Well, thank you for watching and supporting and all those good things, and it's great to hear from you.
Yeah, mainly concerning Washington and Oregon being qualified. I don't really see that as the main goal for the Big Ten, considering that there are bigger fish in the pond, so to speak, particularly with Notre Dame, because that's the crown jewel. They're one of the only independents left that's worth grabbing. And should the ACC's contracts be dodgeable, they should probably go for Clemson, Florida State, and Miami for the aforementioned reasons of getting into that Florida pipeline. So for those reasons, I don't really see that Oregon or Washington join the Big Ten unless both of those contingencies fail. Are we pretty much on the same page there?
I believe that the likelihood of Oregon and Washington joining the Big Ten, the possibility is strong, but I don't know that it's 50-50. So I would agree with you on the ACC side, as I stated minutes ago, and have a number of times on other videos and live streams that. And this is my perspective and my recommendation. This is not me speaking for the Big Ten, that I would go to Florida and go after Florida State and Miami first and foremost. But there is the grant of rights. And for as much as the Big Ten is playing the long game, there may not be a long game to play in terms of its battle with the SEC if it does not go in the direction in which they could. So, for example, let's say your 2 prized commodities that you are targeting, you judge to have a 25% chance of getting those 2 commodities, whatever those are. But you think that 2 other commodities are nearly as strong. They're not your preference, but they're the next 2 in line, and you've got an 80% chance of getting them. So what I'm saying here is that the Big Ten may be in a battle with the SEC in 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, certainly in 12 years for those remaining ACC schools, whereas we know that Oregon and Washington, they've applied for the Big Ten. They want to join the Big Ten, that they are there for the taking. And so maybe the Big Ten only wants to be so big, or maybe they would consider, or maybe they are planning on adding on both coasts, because they've already added to the West Coast. They would be adding history, tradition, connections to that side of the country to help out the USC UCLA contingent. So they've already gone in that direction. So do you understand what I'm saying? It's not necessarily exclusive. They might be going for both, or might be considering both. I don't think there's any question they're considering both directions.
Right. Let's see here. Also, given Notre Dame's geographic location, it would make the most sense to grab Notre Dame. The issue I see there is that Notre Dame has bad blood with the Big Ten, and they've already turned down Big Ten invitations before.
Yep.
So should Notre Dame be a dead end, and should the ACC schools be a dead end, Oregon and Washington are decent pickups.
Well, absolutely they are. Yeah. Again, anytime I've argued both sides, meaning Oregon, Washington is great additions versus Oregon, Washington, it can't be argued that they're awful additions, just less likely additions. The only questions that I couldn't answer would be the value of the TV contracts meeting a certain level to which it would make sense financially for the Big Ten to add Oregon and Washington. But based on, I alluded to this in the conversation with Tim on the last call, but I've said this a million times in the last few months, that the Big Ten's in a great financial spot. Now, I don't think that they're getting their calculators out and thinking, okay, even if NBC and CBS didn't pony up the money to make it cost effective, that they're figuring out, okay, if we add Oregon and Washington, CBS and NBC are only going to add X number of dollars. Therefore, we're going to have to take $1.8 million away from each school and their money distribution, their revenue, TV revenue distribution each year. So it's done. We're not doing that. No, I think their review of the situation is way beyond that in terms of assessing value. It's not all about just, we got 100 million, we're dividing by X number of schools. Now we got 112 million, we're dividing by X number of schools. So therefore, I don't believe it's coming down to just that.
Right. Certain endowments for schools are just ridiculous these days.
Yeah, they've got a lot
Stanford.
more vision than that, and a lot more perspective to just be grinding it down to the penny.
All right. I also heard that the Big Ten was no longer interested in expanding after they picked up UCLA and Southern Cal.
You heard that?
I'm pretty sure an addition of Notre Dame or Stanford or even some of those ACC schools would change their mind, don't you think?
Where did you hear that? And
Tony
I'm not
Altimore?
saying that other people have not said that, but
Right. This may have been when they had their previous commissioner, but I do remember Tony Altimore saying that the Big Ten was done expanding.
so I don't want to speak for Tony, and I know what you're saying. He has made the exception, I believe, about the Stanford route, for one thing, like a combination, maybe Stanford Cal, but certainly Stanford Notre Dame. But again, I don't want to speak for Tony. I believe that if you look at the recent comments just in the last few weeks from the new Big Ten commissioner, Tony Petitti, and then also the chancellor at the University of Illinois, they have left it wide open for this conference to expand. They basically said, this is not a priority in the moment, right now. Well, there's a reason they tack on those conditions right now. Well, that could mean today. That could mean this week. That could mean we're in a board meeting and we're taking a coffee break, and then our afternoon session, we're going to change the agenda. Like, they have left it wide open. Like, I don't take any of that rhetoric it's almost like the rhetoric that's come out of Colorado, Arizona State in the last 3 or 4 months about, we believe in our conference, we have faith, we're optimistic about having a great rights deal, blah, blah, blah. They've said all the right things, but they've even left it open to, but you never know. We're in talks, we're in conversations, we're always open to whatever may happen.
Okay. And in relation to the Pac-12 being quote unquote done or dead, I don't believe that, because when it came to the Big 12, they have lost Missouri, Nebraska, Colorado, Texas A&M, Texas, and Oklahoma. Those were some of their biggest legacy schools. They're all gone, and they're still around. If the Big 12 can figure it out, then the Pac-12 could figure it out, even if they lose Oregon and Washington.
So that's a great point on one hand, but those all happened at different times, of course, and they were able to supplement elsewhere.
That's where I was going. The Pac-12 needs to be more vigilant than they currently are, because all I've heard is Southern Methodist and San Diego State to be in their expansion plans. That pretty much hit a dead end right around March. I haven't heard anything else, unless I'm just out of the loop on something. And say they do lose Oregon and Washington, what next? Because the Big 12 was very aggressive when it came to finding new suitors, and I'm not seeing that same aggression with the Pac-12.
Yeah. So if this were 10 years ago, and where it seemed as though until like the Big Ten more than any other conference, but the other conferences as well, just completely stepped out of their geographic bounds, and just it's become a coast to coast free for all, I would have said, well, the Pac-12 has nowhere to go. They've got SMU and they've got San Diego State, and they've got various schools that don't add enough in the Mountain West. Fresno State, possibly from a football standpoint, I don't think they add anything else beyond that. But in this climate, then maybe they go, I don't know. I don't know how like a Tulane or a Memphis would assess what's going on in the Pac-12. Maybe they would simply assess it as Tony has explained to us recently, and looking at the charts of football and athletics revenue, the American Conference, for being the best of the group of fives on the field, is losing the most money. So maybe those schools would say, hey, even though the Pac-12 is a bit shaky, we're a group of five schools right now. So if we can go from making $5 or $6 or $8 million a year in TV revenue to $25 million a year in revenue, and play on a big stage where we can compete for a playoff spot, let's go.
Right.
So my thinking would have been much more confined, and I think everybody else, to geography, even just a few years ago. But that's been totally torn down. Not that it's, I'm sure I think these conferences consider it because of logistics and travel, but obviously it's nothing to what it was years ago, to where that would have been the first thing we would have been thinking about. Well, USC and UCLA aren't going to join the Big Ten. They're 3,000 miles away.
Right. Yeah, well, it's a very volatile world, specifically for college football and, just the NCAA in general.
I appreciate the call, Ray.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. As you see on the banner below, we're going to talk Clemson, Ohio State. We're going to go back to 2019. So this is great debate month here at the Voice of College Football. We've served up 3 great debates, 2 of them involving this topic that we're discussing today with the Pac-12 and the Big 12, not knowing that this news was going to break today. And again, what is the news? Let's be clear about it. And I haven't dug through all the conversations and all the reports out there, but I'm going by the Brett McMurphy report that, quote, that Oregon and Washington have been vetted and cleared by the Big Ten. And I think that's at the core of what is being reported, and that is the news. And again, for everybody that believes that this is a done deal, Oregon and Washington are going to the Big Ten, do not transition from Do not take that statement and go all the way to the other end, because that could be step 1 out of 5 or 8. Or again, when I hear the terms vetted and cleared, they can be defined in a number of ways. But based on my experience working in corporate America, vetted and cleared simply means, okay, we initially had 15 candidates for this job. We have vetted and cleared all of them. Well, we vetted 15 of them and vetted and cleared 12 of them. That eliminates 3 of them because of a bit of a background check or following up on a reference or something like that. Okay, now we're down to 12. We'll continue on from here. All right, let's take our next call here at the Voice of College Football. We've got Robert on the line. Robert, what's going on today? Hello, Robert.
Hey.
How are you?
All right, nothing much. I was doing a little bit of research before I waited in line here. I have a curiosity. The endowments of the schools, does that go for education funding or is that separate?
That is a great question. So it's my understanding that is completely, and so if you heard what I had to say about 10 or 15 minutes ago, that I've said a number of times that I can't answer. Again, I could run this channel in such a way that take my knowledge and then spin it and answer most questions like I know, but that would not be ethical. So what I'll tell you is, at the crux of all this, I believe, is whether there is a decision made by these schools that is a holistic decision, meaning we gain or lose academically, athletically, football program by making this change? Or is this simply a athletics decision, meaning basically football decision, because our school is going to continue to operate as it currently does, and we can still continue to have relationships and do other things over here. So this is strictly, we can make $12 million more in football per year and sign a 10-year contract or in a rights contract way beyond that and tied to this conference. So we will make X number of dollars more. Therefore, we're going to make this deal. Or whether the academics, which involve so much more money, is tied to it. I can't answer that. But I believe that the endowments
what I was asking, because I looked at their budget for the academics, just their budget compared to their endowment, and their budget is higher than their endowment for Washington and Oregon.
Run that by me again.
I was doing a little bit of research on Oregon and also Washington. Their endowment donations are way lower than what it takes to fund the school.
Way lower, meaning how much lower?
By almost close to, if I remember right, not a full billion, but a little less than $1 billion.
Well, let's also understand, in this situation, Washington and Oregon would be leaving. So this is
there's a motive to those schools. That's what I'm trying to say.
It's a no-brainer. It makes sense across the board. It's not like this is a good football decision, but it's a bad academic decision.
Yeah, in this case, this is a good decision for their side, but is it for the Big Ten? I don't think so. Right off the bat, right now, because I think most likely we're going to be looking at maybe the way they said. I'd say about 3 years until they make their next move. Because of how the Big Ten moves, they move in certain time frames.
I guess they do. They added Maryland and Rutgers. What? Yeah, 3 years after
Nebraska. 3 years. Then this one, the recent one is 10 years. So it's been 3 then 10 years routine.
Well, I don't think that's enough history to tell us that they have some kind of set format or trend.
It might shrink it down, but not by much. I don't think so. Because the last time from Michigan State to Penn State, that was 40 years. So then from Penn State to Nebraska, that was over 20 years.
Yeah, I think what happened in those cases is completely irrelevant to what's going on now.
Nowadays, yeah. But I still think it's going to be a couple of years down the road, not right away, not instant like this.
Yeah, I don't know, and it would be foolish for me to. I could make a guess, but I don't. Yeah, I don't think the Big Ten. Again, they're acting in a position of strength, so they don't need to do anything.
Yeah, they're in the position of power. I mean, in my case, I'm like, they can just sit back and watch how Oregon and Washington acts after USC and UCLA leave. That's the number one thing I think they're going to try watching it after that first season with them having USC and UCLA.
Yeah, with time you gain more information. I don't exactly know what they would be watching for, but you're right in terms of the. So I agree with your statement conceptually, meaning that with more time to evaluate the situation, you just gain further and further knowledge and evaluation of that commodity. But I don't know what they're going to gain by watching Washington and Oregon play a season in which they're both going to go 9-3.
Yeah, I would say maybe not even a full season. I'd say probably 2 to 3 seasons.
Okay.
To get an idea of their track record without them boosting their ratings and everything else.
Okay. That's where that makes sense. Yeah.
Exactly. That's where I was going from.
Okay.
I
thought you were talking about playing football on the field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Besides the academics part, also the football part, because we know the Big Ten's about not just academics, but also the football.
Certainly. Well, it's bad news for the Pac-12 that their most watched game last season was USC and UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good.
No, it isn't.
For the two leaving.
Mm-hmm. And the only thing I think of that'll change the game is if Notre Dame comes into the Big Ten, most likely it won't be pretty much Oregon and Washington. Most likely it'll be Stanford and Cal.
Yeah, I agree.
And a lot of Oregon fans get ticked off about that, but I'm like, that's most logical because then you have all the Notre Dame's on rivals in all in one conference.
Yeah, and again, Oregon would be more attractive if the Big Ten was acting out of desperation or needing to boost its football brand. Like the Oregon is so much more attractive to the Big 12. Oregon would become the best football program in the Big 12. And it's not even, I don't want to say it's not close, but it's not debatable.
Mm-hmm.
But Oregon's the what in the Big 10? We could have all sorts of debates. 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th.
Yeah, because really they have to withstand a 8-game conference schedule, 8 to 9 game conference schedule. Who knows if they're going to be able to handle that? That's my main point for Oregon fans. You're judging a couple of years span, maybe only playing Big Ten schools maybe twice a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oregon has competed well against the Big Ten. There's no question about that. They've played well. I posted a video a few weeks ago with the numbers. 11-6 comes to mind in the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
But 11-6 is not going to win championships. That's for sure.
No. Yeah, my main point is that are they going to be able to take that pummeling week in and week out of a Big Ten schedule? That's the number one thing.
Yeah. Well, you're going to rile up some Pac-12. You're going to rile up some Pac-12 fans with that comment, Robert. But I do agree. The Big Ten's a better conference than the Pac-12.
It's a tougher conference. That's the number one thing. It's tougher defensively. Those teams play hard, smash mouth defense, and not a lot of teams can really handle that type of defense. It's like going against SEC defenses at the same time. They're just as tough.
You're playing more NFL players.
Exactly. You're getting better quality defensive players that you're going to have to face up to.
Now, before I get a bunch of Pac-12 people on my back, so they're going to be on your back, Robert, but you're going to click.
Oh, I've had them on my back for a long while anyways. I've been dealing with them on Twitter for a while.
I love Pac-12 football. I believe Pac-12 football had a bit of a renaissance. It may be short-lived. Well, it is going to be short-lived because obviously
very short-lived.
2 of the top 4 programs are leaving or whatever, 2 of the top 5. But it's also short-lived because I just think the quarterback, they fell into a great quarterback year last year, and they've got those guys coming back. So they've got another great crop of quarterbacks this year again. However, year to year, and I love the Pac-12, and I would love that. I would want I want these conferences to be what they were years and years ago. That's what I would
Oh,
want.
yeah, definitely. I'm not disagreeing with you on that. I'm not disagreeing. I wish the Pac-12 was the way it was back then, but it's just
not
that
happening.
with
It's not
recruiting,
reality.
changing, and everything, it changes the game completely.
So, but again,
Yeah, I'm
Pac-12
not
fans
in
are
a
going to
position.
pile
Hey,
on
I'm
me.
just saying,
I believe
analytically,
we
I'm
have a
just
good
looking at it.
conference, but it's not the Big Ten. All right, Robert, anything else?
Nothing really after that little discussion.
Well, I appreciate you being here.
Oh, that's no problem.
Have a good one.
Same to you.
All right, let's try Chris once again. Chris, how you doing today?
Good. Better audio.
Perfect. I can't hear myself. That's a good thing.
In reference to your last caller, I think you were trying to figure out where Oregon would have fit in last year. Do you want to know?
No, that's
You don't
not what I was trying to figure out.
Oh, okay, so you don't want to know?
I was just saying in general.
Well, I don't know in general, but last season.
Speaking in general, where Oregon would rank in the Big Ten, not specifically last year. And this is what people sometimes don't understand. And I apologize for going on a bit of a rant because this has nothing to do with you. But like when I put out Pac-12 power rankings the other day, and I have people arguing with me. First of all, it's just an opinion and it's just a projection. And it's just based on evaluating rosters after spring practice. And
right.
For example, people all offended Utah fans because I had them number 3 in the Pac-12 and they're citing that they won the championship last year. Let's understand that those spots between each team in the Pac-12 were razor thin last year. And the Utah Utes finished at 7-2. And therefore they finished tied with 2 other schools for second place in the Pac-12. So they just based on that, you would rank them anywhere between 2nd and 4th. So anyway, not to go on a tangent, but I just get annoyed when people like take minute details and manipulate what I said and what I rank and don't really get the concept. But anyway, go to it, Chris. It's the stage is yours.
I wasn't trying to contradict you. I'm sorry if you got that.
I know you weren't. I wasn't speaking to you. I basically took something you said and just related that to about 15 other comments that I got in the last few days.
Well, at any rate, I've already sent you this information, but I had UCLA just behind Iowa last season. And that's interesting because Iowa I have as 3rd last season in the Big Ten. So, okay. That means if I did this correctly, which
whoa. I'm sorry, Chris, to interrupt, but you had Iowa 3rd in the Big Ten. Hello, Chris. You still with us? Hello, Chris.
Yes.
Oh, there you are. I'm just clarifying. You had Iowa 3rd in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Where did you have Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State?
Ohio State's 3rd, or I'm sorry, 2nd, Michigan, you said 1st, and Penn State I have. Oh, wait. Oh, Penn State. You're right. I'm sorry. I left Penn State. Penn State was 3rd. I'm sorry.
You had Iowa 4th. And
yeah, 4th.
That's a big free-for-all between Minnesota, Iowa, Purdue, Illinois, Maryland. You could rank any of those teams 4 through 8, in my opinion.
Well, the reason I'm sorry, the reason I didn't have Penn State up there, I delegated them out to a different conference because I was working on the premise that they might leave, but I know that's not in the works or nothing. But anyway, to what my point I was getting at, I guess, and I didn't do it very well. There's several teams actually that we might consider if the idea is to improve the Big Ten, and it's not just limited to Oregon and Washington. If it's just based on last season, I mean, and you can throw this out if you don't like it, but I have Utah, actually both Washington and Utah rated in the top 10. I have Oregon State in the top 20, and I have Washington State in the top 50. Then after that, there's a drop off. So, I mean, in terms of like, if it's not based on a history, but just based on a 1 year, I mean, conceivably that means that if they're looking to do it, you could consider Oregon State and Washington State relatively easily and still make improvement there. I don't know if you.
Well, a conference would be very short-sighted to make a determination and a decision of that weight based on one football season.
Well, but it's the most, it's the most recent year, though. I mean, what else do you want to base it on? I'm sorry. I mean, I don't understand quite what you're getting at there, but I mean, that's the latest year that we can look at. I mean,
so you think the Big Ten should add Tulane because they had a great football season last year?
Well, no, but I mean, that's what you would look at, though.
Well, that's what you just stated.
Well,
so
okay.
Big Ten should go out and get Tulane.
No, I wasn't pushing Tulane, but I guess if that's what you want to, if that's what you would put someone, if the idea is to make a conference a better conference, that would be a good team to bring in.
This is kind of a foolish discussion because
why
conferences these are huge decisions. We cannot even put into context how large a decision this is to add a school as an institution, a athletics program with like 25 or 30 sports plus a football program, and you're going to base that on because they made a couple field goals and finished 9-3 instead of 7-5. No, that's not how decisions are made, first of all. And I'm not even getting into all the variances of TV markets and brand and money and all that. We're just talking about playing football.
Well, the point I guess what I was trying to tell you is I think in terms of who they, if it does go through, which, you said it might not, which I wouldn't know. But I mean,
I don't know either.
Oh, okay.
No one knows.
It looks like they picked two of the, I mean, of course they would have anyway, but it looks like they picked the two best that they could, except for one school, actually. It's Utah. I mean, Utah looks like they might be a better addition, I guess, than Oregon. I don't know if you agree with that.
I think that's debatable. I think that's very close. Utah is a better school by various metrics. But in terms of comparing them as football programs, it's extremely close.
Right. Well, no, it's kind of funny you bring that up because that's kind of what I was trying to say. But I guess what I'm saying, you have regional, what do you call it there? I just would think that would, assuming they go through, which I'm guessing they will, which obviously remains to be seen, but you don't think that paves, I mean, I don't disagree that Florida State and Miami might not be a good, but I'm looking at it from a different angle, Mark, and I think, why not just stay there? Why not, instead of looking outside, I mean, why not bring in Oregon State? Why not bring in, like I said, Washington State? I know isn't quite as, well, actually, they're actually quite a bit better as far as the last season. You say Miami, Florida, but Miami, Florida actually kind of sucked last year. I don't know. You really want to take that into consideration. But
that doesn't matter.
It doesn't?
Chris, I'm sorry to jump on you about this again, but yes, Oregon State was a much better football team last year than Miami. We both know that. Everybody listening to us right now knows that.
I think they're better than Florida State.
Well, they both went 10-3. We could argue that all day.
All right.
But they were clearly better than Miami. That's not what the Big Ten or any conference would be evaluating, just how good the football team was last year. That's like a tiny, tiny consideration. Miami is worth much more than Oregon State. They just are.
How so? I'm not completely following your argument there.
Metropolitan area.
Okay.
School, brand, potential.
Potential?
Yeah.
Well, I know historically they're a lot better, no doubt. I mean, historically, there's no comparison. Is that what I guess I'm kind of curious, is that what you're basing it on, is the history? Because I know historically Miami, Florida is way up there. They're top 15, I think. So is that kind of what you're looking at, is the history there?
That shows the potential that they could do that again. But people watch Miami play football. People watch Miami play football. Miami can be great in football. The Big Ten would stake ground in Florida, which is arguably the best football playing state in America.
Right.
Cool talent.
Sure.
And they've got the Miami TV market. It's slightly larger than Corvallis, Oregon.
Well, no, Mark, I guess that's not quite, I know what you're getting at there, and I don't. But like Nebraska, I mean, come on. Nebraska doesn't have a large, I mean, maybe they have like a large following, but, if you're basing it solely on television market, I mean.
I'm not basing it solely on television market. I just named about 5 things. That was one of them.
Well, I guess I'm kind of curious if you're not maybe neglecting a few things. I mean, and I'm not here to throw stones at you, Mark.
There are more trees in Oregon than in Miami. Maybe I neglected that.
No, I guess my point is, if I have a point, like one of them brought up, it's attendance. Does Miami draw a big crowd? I don't know. I haven't really been there. I kind of had the impression that they really don't draw that big of a crowd.
They can, but they have not.
And I don't know what the size of the audience is for Oregon State, but you're saying that the only schools that really did well were UCLA and USC. Isn't that kind of what you said? The others.
What do you mean?
Well, they said that the top draw was USC, UCLA, and that was
television. Yes.
So how did the other schools compare? I mean, did you look at that before you?
Oh, absolutely. I did a full video I did several videos on television ratings from last season. And the Pac-12 numbers are respectable. Oregon, Utah, Washington, people watch their games when they're playing each other. Now, here's the difference. Somebody like Ohio State can play anybody and people watch the games.
Okay.
Millions of views.
Okay.
They be playing Toledo. They got over 3 million views for a Toledo game. To put this in perspective, the Ohio State Northwestern game had a larger TV audience than any Pac-12 game the entire season.
Oh, okay.
Now, that's not to diss on the Pac-12. That's just a fact. But when Oregon, Washington, Utah play each other, they get good TV ratings. Now, when Washington's playing Arizona State or Oregon's playing Arizona, well, nobody watches those games. When I say nobody, obviously there are people watching the games, but it's not significant.
Well, I guess the question I might have then, because I understand what you're trying to tell me, I think, but I still kind of look at it from a perspective as, if assuming this goes through, which I'm guessing it will, because I don't think it's just a rumor. I kind of suspect there's, not knowing obviously, because I don't know, but I would think that the next move might be to include partners such as, it just makes sense to me. Why not include Washington State, Oregon State? I mean, those are just the natural teams I would think you consider. And then maybe even Utah, since Utah's as good as they are. And I think even Colorado, personally, think would be a good fit. And because I've been to Colorado, I know kind of what they're like. Somebody even brought it up. I don't know if it was on your show. They said the one game that they won, they said it was like a sellout or something like that. I didn't go, and then I think they drew a big crowd to their spring game.
Yes.
Like 40,000 people, something like that.
Absolutely, they did. They're excited for the season. Yes.
You don't see that they would bring anything?
Oh, I think we had that conversation a few weeks ago about Colorado in the Big Ten, and there are pros and cons. I'm not in any way saying that Colorado would bring no value to the Big Ten, but they don't bring enough value for the Big Ten to add Colorado, in my estimation.
Have you been there? I mean, it's a beautiful place. I don't know if you've ever been there.
Colorado probably 20 times.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so you know the area, kind of what the.
Yeah, it's been to baseball games, football games. I've hiked, I've biked. I've been in Colorado.
Well, what is it you don't like about them then? If you've been there,
me wanting to go to Colorado as a tourist is different than me deciding, or anyone deciding that they would be a great addition to a football conference.
Well, I don't like to use this word because it might not be politically correct, but I think they have sex appeal. I'm sorry. I think if you added Colorado, I think you get a little bit more than just, you get the name, you get the brand, whatever that is, but you also get, I went to school there. I know a little bit about it. I mean, it's a pretty beautiful place.
But understand, sex appeal is different on the surface than it is. So what about South Bend, Indiana has sex appeal? Nothing. And I'm not, I've never been there. I shouldn't say this for sure, but I'm taking this from everything I've ever heard from anyone else. South Bend, Indiana has zero sex appeal compared to what you were just using as sex appeal. Mountains and nice cities and
exactly
blue skies and all that. South Bend, Indiana has zero in comparison.
Okay. Well, no,
but Notre Dame is in South Bend, Indiana. And what is the most coveted school and football program in the country for expansion? Notre Dame.
No, I understand that.
Okay. All right. All right, Chris. Thanks for being here.
Okay.
Anytime.
Thanks, Mark. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. I want to pick off these super chats before we move along to our buddy David. Larry, thank you so much for the contribution. These super chats are more difficult for some reason. Like in the last 5 days, they look the same to all of you on the screen, but I can't find them in the chat anymore because they used to appear in my chat like they do on the screen. They come up in big orange or green. So they were blocked off in bright color so I could see them. Now they look exactly like everything else. So I don't know what happened there. Larry says, jumping in the pool, folks, and have a great day. Go Utes. Jumping in the pool. Yes, yesterday. See, it's got to be awfully hot for me to jump in the pool. The older I get, the blood's thinner. Like, I don't jump in a pool if it's 78 degrees. Like, it's got to be hot to jump in a pool. And it's not quite there here in the Buckeye State. But have a good time, Larry. That sounds fun. Ever since my kids got older, I've done a lot less swimming. From the time that they were like 3, even before that, shoot, we threw them in the pool when they were like a year old. They had their floaties on, so don't call me a bad dad. But, you know, I was right there with them. But, yeah, from about a year old until like their early teen years, a lot of swimming. I actually came across something the other day where my kids, there's been a lot of moving around the Voice of College Football headquarters. A lot of moving parts in the last year. Came across something the other day that my kids drew up for me. It wasn't even on Father's Day. They just would do things like this. They made up a little project and they're pasting things and they were saying why dad was cool and why dad so forth and so on. And one of the things was taking them to go swimming all the time. Did a lot of swimming. There was a swimming pool, bam, right there. All right. Anyway, you guys don't care about that. John says, Miami does not have to leave the state for a top 5 class. Yes. Remember Bama before Nick and look at them now. Stanford and Cal bring more than Oregon. Correct. If Alabama is a blue blood, arguably the greatest football program of all time, but we did see pre-Nick Saban that from 1992 in a national championship under Gene Stallings to 2008, getting back to the Sugar Bowl under Nick Saban and to an SEC championship game that year, that Bama could be anything from 3-8 to playing in SEC championship games, but really being no factor in the national championship race for 15 years, 16 years. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football, David.
Welcome. Good to be here, Mark. I learned a new term, by the way. I think when evaluating programs, sex appeal should always be considered.
Yes,
I
we
just want to
sex appeal more today than we have in maybe in the history of the Voice of College Football. We will need to get some kind of stagehand or somebody researching that to see what the count is on sex appeal here.
Yes, I think that should always be considered.
Yes.
I just want to say the more college football changes, I wonder if it changes for the better. I mean, I've always thought, Mark, you see yourself more as a traditionalist a little bit. I mean, I'm not trying to paint you into a corner, but I think you'll take that claim, right?
Heck yeah.
Okay. So we're basically at a point here, and I guess the writing, to me, the writing is always on the wall. I don't know if this is your view, is once these major conferences lose their anchor programs, I mean, isn't that, I don't want to say the death nail, but when you lose, I mean, the anchor program of the Pac-10 has always been USC. I mean, it's been the most dominant program in that conference's history. I mean, Oregon had a really good run, you know, and obviously UCLA's had some good teams. You know, I remember back to the Donahue era, they have had some good teams. But once you lose your anchor program, That's a bad sign for a conference. Obviously, you look at the Big 12, you lose Texas and Oklahoma, you lose your anchor programs, and what are you as a conference at that particular point?
And correct me if I'm wrong, going through history, that would be a first in terms of Texas, Oklahoma leaving the Big 12, in which a major conference, has lost its premier programs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Big 12, I think, has been able to recover from that as well as they could have. So that's been my take, is that the 4 schools that they obtained were the 4 schools that I recommended. Not that they listened to me, but they were the 4 schools out there that I thought were the best gets, but they don't in any way come close to Texas and Oklahoma. So the Big 12 is going to continue. It's going to be intriguing to watch, but in my eyes, they're going to continue as somebody said it, an earlier caller. They said like 3 times, the Big 12 is going to be fine. The Big 12 is fine. Well, it depends on what your requirements are.
Definition of fine is,
they're going to schedule a football season. They're going to play games that people are going to watch. 2 and 3 million people are going to watch on TV, and they're going to make money. Mm-hmm. So if that's their business model and that's what they're looking for, just to make money and have successful football programs for their schools to attract fans and to attract students to the schools, yes. We're talking about being relevant for a national championship. They're done.
Yeah, I mean, would you make the comparison of like I put this out there before, the Big East of the 2000s? Post Miami's kind of dominant period there. Remember when the Big East was basically a sacrificial lamb in BCS bowl games there, Mark?
I didn't think that I did not think that the Big East should have been included in the BCS series.
I agree.
I did not believe that they were. Now, if somebody would go back and look at their record in those games, it's not as bad as you would think it is. But you know why it wasn't? They would get, for whatever reason, I just think that the powers that be, ESPN in this case, would basically determine matchups and be like, you know what, we're going to have one bad BCS game, and we'll let Cincinnati and Virginia Tech play in the Orange Bowl like they did one year, or Wake Forest and Louisville play when Louisville was in the Big East. We'll set up the worst matchup. So they typically played the worst teams that qualified for BCS games, and therefore it helped their record. But they did not earn a spot at the table in my estimation.
Yeah, there were some beat downs in there, though. Pitt or was it Cincinnati taking that one big time beat down? I remember Pitt taking a big time beat down. Yes. Earned some coin on a few of those games. That's why they stick out in my mind. So, yeah.
UConn.
What's that?
UConn.
Yeah, UConn was bad. Yeah, that wasn't very good either.
Oklahoma. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I will say this, though. The one thing about the Big Ten here, I mean, kudos to the Big Ten, I guess. Just further evidence, Mark, that this is basically a 2-league sport going forward, and I think you're right. I mean, the TV revenue for the Big Ten is just ridiculous. And I think that's been a huge part of, the other thing too, and maybe this should be talked about a little bit more, and maybe you've already mentioned it, Mark, is a lot of the Big Ten folks in the Midwest that go to Big Ten schools kind of disperse, throughout the country. So you have some of the folks that graduate from Big Ten schools that move out to the West Coast and in those areas too.
Yeah, our buddy Tim, who does the USC post game and the Sunday night show for USC, he says that all the time, that he works and lives in Los Angeles, and says, in reviewing college football fans that he knows and works with and is friends with, there are as many, if not more, Ohio State fans, Michigan fans, Notre Dame fans, Penn State fans that have, dispersed from the Midwest.
Yeah, see, I'm back to my original question about, being a traditionalist. I was, I want the conferences to be strong. And I've said this before about the Big Ten, and the Big Ten, I think for the most part, now it could have had better playoff results over the years. Certainly, as an Ohio State fan, I know that. Unfortunately, after the first playoff, but for the most part, it's done its part to at least put out competitive teams, and obviously, they produced a bunch of NFL players. You mentioned that earlier, but at the same time, I think it would be good if we could have all of the major conferences at least have 2 power players. You know what I mean? When you go back to the Big 8 years when it was like Oklahoma, Nebraska for their conference title. We talked about it when USC and UCLA were kind of at their peak, or really good in the 80s, when that used to be the game to decide the Pac-10. And that's why I was kind of hoping there was going to be a team while Miami or Florida State were the likely candidates to come up and challenge Clemson, so that could at least be a 2-team race in the ACC there for a period of time. But it's just, the sport is just dispersing to 2 conferences. These are going to be the 2 conferences that hold relevance going forward. And again, I just go back to, it's a changing sport. I just wonder if it's a changing sport for the better.
I don't believe so, for 2 different reasons. One is that I believe that college football is different than any other sport in America. And you could put college basketball in this bucket for obvious reasons, or any college athletics for obvious reasons, that school connection. But I'll distinguish football because it's outdoor, and because of the grand spectacle of the game and 80, 100,000 people. But what is being torn from its fabric are all the cultural and geographic nuances that makes it so entertaining and interesting. Is the Big Ten is the Midwest, and the SEC is the Southeast, not Missouri. The Big Ten's not Rutgers and Nebraska, but it was more the Midwest, and certainly Nebraska fits that to a certain extent. But the Big 8 was now the Big 12 in recent years. The Plains, the Dust Bowl, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Texas, that, and the West Coast, of course, with the Pac-12. And there are a lot of things that are not otherwise football related that are connected to those areas of the country. Just ways of living,
right?
Ways of talking, music, food, that
just culture in different cultures, Mark.
Yes.
I completely agree with you.
Make it interesting.
Well, yeah, but you know what, Mark? That's the sport. It's less regionalized. You kind of see that recruiting too. You know what I mean? It's become less regionalized maybe than it has been for the year, or, over the years too. And yeah, I just, the future of the sport, then the playoff too. I mean, what are we going to draw out a college football season to now? We're going to basically, the championship game is going to be on what, championship game weekend, AFC NFC championship game weekend, or right around that time.
Yes, we are going to watch the AFC and NFC championship games on Sunday, and then Monday night we're going to watch the college football national championship game.
Yeah, I once said that if you created like the greatest football weekend ever, you could have the national championship game on a Saturday and then play the Super Bowl on the Sunday. Of course, the NFL would be up in arms and would never whatever. But
yeah, it takes away from the build-up.
Yeah, all football fans could just lock themselves in their houses for a Saturday and a Sunday and just not.
Well, this is the first time that you set it up this way that I've wondered whether this is going to detract from the national championship game. So, well, there's a playoff weekend in football in the NFL prior to the current national championship game on a Monday night. So it's similar, but it just kind of takes away, I guess, to a certain extent, regardless. January 20th is that date, which I think of Super Bowls being played not that long ago around January 20th. I just think I don't care for it.
Well, right. I've mentioned in the past, I don't like about the NFL dragging out their season. I mean, I'm kind of in a minority in that because, I probably a slightly more NFL fan than I am a college fan. But at the same time, I was not the biggest fan of the 17th game added to the season and drawing out the season even more. And you know, a lot of friends that supported it, they just think more football is for the best. But
Yeah, 17 games is, first of all, just an odd number.
yeah,
Secondly, you know, now we're talking about, we used to finish up the regular season around Christmas time, like that week of Christmas. And then you would actually see wild card games being played around New Year's Day, whatever week that fell on, and then continue from there. Now we're playing regular season NFL games in January.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I always thought, I don't think the NFLPA would go for it, but I guess if you throw out enough dollars, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
how many NFL players want to take that kind of physical abuse for that
Yes.
many games of a season? I mean, you know, the NFL stands for not for long, and it definitely means that when it comes to an NFL career, which an average NFL career isn't that long. So, you know what I
Well,
mean?
we could talk about why that is. I don't think that that's solely injuries. But anyway,
Well, okay, fair, but you know,
so,
adding another game doesn't necessarily
yeah,
help the cause.
yeah, this seems completely hypocritical to me, that both the players themselves, and certainly former players, but also the NFL itself, the rhetoric has been, more than anything over the last 10 years or so, has been about the safety of the players.
Right, right,
But they're adding a game.
right.
Why is a game, like, is this going to distinguish anything, even make a distinction between the teams that have earned a playoff spot? Like 16 games isn't sufficient. It's not like college football, where we really don't have a great gauge on these teams. They don't play outside their conferences more than one meaningful game. So there's a lot to be said that if we were just playing video games and players' health wasn't called into question, we would need a whole lot more of college football games to really get a determination of how good these teams are.
Yeah,
But you've got a universe of 32 teams playing 16 games against each other. We get a clear picture after 16 regular season games who the teams are that have earned a playoff spot.
yeah, and back to the college points, obviously, you know, college program here, but you know, I mean, now you're going to have a 12-team playoff with what, a 12-game regular season and a conference championship game.
Yeah, they're going to play 17 games.
Yeah,
16 to 17.
yeah.
Yeah.
College student athletes, right? And I quote.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now, one thing I will say about your original point about the tradition of college football being ripped away.
Yeah.
I will say that I don't like the way we're headed, or the way we've already gone. But I do look forward to certain matchups. I am intrigued by seeing teams on the same field that don't play each other currently. And that's not just the marquee matchups. Like, I'm interested to watch Minnesota and UCLA play.
Well, but you know what, though, Mark? I think that a lot of getting better matchups in college football maybe goes back to a Mark Rogers point about getting scheduling corrected in college football.
Yeah.
You know, let's put Mark Rogers in charge of this scheduling, and maybe we, you know, start to see. Now, I think there's been more progress over the last 15 to 20 years of seeing some more marquee non-conference matchups, wouldn't you say?
You would think so.
I don't know. Go ahead.
I tend to think that too before I really give it some thought. But if you go back into the 80s and start to look at some of these non-conference schedules.
Yeah.
I know this is just one example, but the Auburn team in 1983 that was leapfrogged by Miami in the final poll.
Yeah.
To win the national championship. That team, their out of conference schedule was ridiculous.
Yeah.
They played Texas. Maryland was a top 10 team. They played like 4 games like that.
Yeah. Maybe I was thinking more about like 90s or earlier 2000s, the non-conference not being as great. Well, you would know better. I mean, obviously you've done a deep dive research into a lot of this, I'm sure, but
yeah, what I don't like about really where we stand now, but I think it's going to be emphasized or accentuated going forward, is the lack of needing to schedule a difficult non-conference game. It's not. Michigan's made the playoffs the last 2 years. They didn't play anyone non-conference.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
Why?
Yeah, they have
Why would
built-in
they
wins.
seem to?
Yep, they have built-in wins to start the season. Listen, as an Ohio State fan, you know, I guess this actually did kind of start back in the 2000s. To me, it started with that 05-06 Texas series. You know what I mean? You know, and then they did the USC series, and you know, so they started to kind of amp up a little bit more at that time frame. Now there was a little bit of a dry spell there after that. You know, obviously, I think maybe when they scheduled Virginia Tech was maybe a little bit better of a program.
Washington, Miami wasn't good when they played them back to back.
Yeah, but again, the schedule was probably put together a few years before when people were thinking Miami was probably a better program.
Yes.
But then they did kick it up with catching Oklahoma in back-to-back years. You know, the Baker Mayfield Oklahoma teams in 16 and 17.
But look at some of those schedules from the 90s with Boston College when they were good, a lot of Washington, Pitt. Trying to think who else came up. A lot of Missouri for some reason. And some others that were good. West Virginia was the 98 opener when they were pretty good.
And that was supposed to be a real good West Virginia team, yeah. Hey, I was going to ask you, last thing, is the Ohio State Clemson 2019 debate going to be open to live call-in? Because I'm writing down my notes as we speak.
Everybody can call in and talk and so forth. The only thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of, for lack of a better term, close circuit it, because it'll get taken down like that out here on the main channel. And it will probably actually get copyrighted. So I'm going to explain this to everybody before we start, that it'll probably get taken down for like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Something like that. But we'll be there. It'll come back. That's most likely what's going to happen. But it's going to be closed off from the main YouTube audience because we don't want it to get taken down. So we want to be able to watch the game. We're not going. I want to be value everyone's time. We're not going to sit there for 3.5 hours and watch the whole. Like we'll kind of zip through it and. You know, we'll watch it. I don't want to just watch the 3 plays that are controversial. Like I want to watch some of the game, but I'll skip forward between plays and we'll get through it in hopefully like 90 minutes, something like that.
Seems like there was a lot more than 3, but obviously I'm seeing this from an Ohio State.
Oh yeah, there were yeah.
But
well, in terms of calls made by officials, I'm thinking of 3.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I think I know the ones you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be getting my notes ready, Mark, and I will be prepared. So.
And then we're also going to get together the 2016 Ohio State-Michigan game.
Oh, okay. I'll be prepared for that one too.
And anything else that anyone wants to start up?
Hey, your biggest fan base, you know, needs something to stew over as well. So, you know, yes. I get the point. All right, Mark. Well, interesting day of college football. Good talk.
Good stuff, Dave. Thanks for calling.
Take care.
Have a good day. You know, it's funny because I'm on some Michigan and Ohio State. So I jumped on and became a member of a lot of college football Facebook groups. Not that I do not want to participate in those conversations, believe me, but I only did that so I could share the channel link and go in there. And I'm very upfront about, for example, I'm a member of like 4 West Virginia Facebook groups. And I stated when I applied for them, when they say, "Are you a West Virginia fan?" No, but this is what I do for West Virginia football. So they have all allowed me to join their Facebook groups. I find it rather amusing that these Michigan fans are mighty upset about their FPI standing against Ohio State. And the game is an FPI indicator of 72-28 in Ohio State's favor. And they are mad about this, upset. Now, I'm not picking on Michigan fans because if it was the other way around, Ohio State fans would be upset about that. But of course, there's this large contingency of Michigan fans that believe ESPN's pro Ohio State and the FPI's pro Ohio State. No. In this particular year, 2019, Ohio State was coming off another Big Ten championship, another top 3 finish in the country, a Rose Bowl win, all of it. And the FPI gave Ohio State a 7. Think about how ludicrous this is. This is just, to the biggest Ohio State hater out there, you can still contemplate how ridiculous this is. In 2019, the preseason FPI projection for Ohio State was a 7% chance of winning the Big Ten. In what universe? In what dimension out there, the Twilight Zone, could Ohio State ever only win the Big Ten 7 out of 100 times? So that's the FBI. And then, of course, Ohio State went 13-0. They didn't win a game by less than 2 scores that entire season and won the Big Ten championship. So I go in there and mess around with Michigan fans, and I go in there and mess around with Ohio State fans as well, and bring them down to earth as well. So for many of you, you should rest assured that I hold the Ohio State fans accountable as well. As I posted the other day on Twitter, I honored Ohio State fans with being the dumb fan base of the day for that particular day, based on what I was seeing on social media. Antoine says, I just enjoy trolling regardless. Wet Blanket, you are, who do you root for? Oklahoma State, right? Yeah. I don't know what point you're making here. Ohio State also has the best record in college football in the last 50 years. I don't know what your point there is. Yes, 2 national championships in 50 years. Yeah. And we know what national championships are worth. And then every time I see a statement like that, that makes me want to jump on my national championship breakdown. That makes me want to get right to it, because we're going to go through all the national championship seasons in the history of college football. I am determined we will do that. I know it's almost June now, and I'm running out of time. And I have so many other topics to get to. And what we've got lined up right now is we're going to finish our conference power rankings. We just released the Big Ten late last night. Got program rankings coming. We got position rankings coming. We're going to rank the top 10 quarterbacks, the top 10 running backs, the top 10 offensive linemen, et cetera, et cetera. If I want to be as insane as I was a couple of years ago, this was about 3 or 4 years ago, I ranked the top 10 at every position in every conference. So if you do the math, that's 5 conferences by like 12 positions. I did 60 videos on the top 10 at every position in every conference. Don't know that I'm going to get that accomplished this year, but we're going to do the top 10 at every position nationally. And yes, I was about to say I don't care how many people watch it, but I truly do care how many people watch it. I'm going to go through every season. We are going to go through every season in college football, and we will be correcting a lot of these national championship seasons. We will be correcting what the writers and the coaches poll messed up. All right. Chris says that is how an out-of-conference schedule should look. I don't know what he's pointing to there. Michigan from 90 to 97. Well, played Notre Dame 7 times. I'm guessing they actually played Notre Dame 8 times, because 90 to 97 is 8 seasons, and they played Notre Dame every year. I might be wrong. They might have missed 1 year. They played the UCLA a couple times. Maryland, Boston College 4 times, Florida State. Didn't they play Florida State twice? No, you're right. Florida State in 91. Oklahoma State was awful then. Houston twice. Washington State, they were awful. Colorado 3 times. Virginia, Memphis, Miami of Ohio, and Baylor. So that must be the complete run of, because he just didn't name all the really good teams. He named everybody, I guess. Is that all of Michigan's games going back then? I'm going to relive this, and I'm probably going to, and one of my favorite tabs that I have right there available to me at any time is historical scores in college football. So I'm going to relive this here a little bit. Michigan. Bam. All right, here we go. Sure, I watched about all these games. 1990. In 90, played Notre Dame and UCLA and Maryland out of conference games. That was Michigan's out of conference schedule, with only playing 11 games at that point in the regular season. So 3 out of conference games, 8 conference games. Look at Wisconsin in 1990. That was Barry Alvarez's first season. 1-10. Lost to a good Notre Dame team, 28-24. Beat a marginal UCLA team, 38-15. Beat Maryland, who was 6-5-1. I'm going to lose viewers here, I know. Beat BC in 91. So when people cite games from years and years and years and years ago and say, hey, you didn't play anyone, look at these games, da, 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 or say, we played all these great schools, let's understand that we need to be looking in the lens of 1990 or 91 and not the lens of right now. So these programs sometimes change. Boston College sucked. Notre Dame was good. Florida State was extremely good. And I remember Terrell Buckley with a pick 6 in that game at the Big House. But just think about that. To our guy's point here, imagine Michigan's schedule now out of conference being Notre Dame, UCLA, and Maryland, which of course they're in the Big Ten, or being Boston College, Notre Dame, and Florida State, or being Notre Dame, Oklahoma State, and Houston. Yeah, that 92 Michigan team that did not lose a game but tied 3 times. Oklahoma State wasn't good. Houston wasn't good. But still, you're scheduling Notre Dame, Oklahoma State, and Houston. You're scheduling Washington State, Notre Dame, and Houston. Scheduling BC, Notre Dame, and Colorado, a Buffs team that went 11-1. And, of course, that was the famed Cordell Stewart Hail Mary pass. 1995, the kickoff classic. Remember the Pigskin Classic against Virginia? That was the last-second touchdown pass by, I believe, Scott Dreisbach. Virginia, Memphis, and BC in Miami of Ohio with an added non-conference game that year. 1996, Colorado, BC, UCLA. Pretty strong, even though BC and UCLA were down. National championship season, they beat Colorado. They played Baylor and Notre Dame. That sounds really good, but Colorado sucked. Baylor was awful, and Notre Dame wasn't that good. But they were trying. They were scheduling really difficult non-conference games. Then I'm guessing it started to waver here. 1998, you tack on or you add in Eastern Michigan. Then you add in Rice. Then you start to add in Bowling Green and Rice. This is where the non-conference schedules for Michigan just started to fall apart. Then you add in Miami of Ohio and Western Michigan. And now we've gotten to what our current formula basically is. And that's 1 difficult non-conference games, 2 cupcakes. Although at this point, Utah was included. They were not a Power 5 team at the time. Western Michigan, there you see the Notre Dame game in 2002. Central Michigan, Houston, Notre Dame, and Oregon. So 4 non-conference games for Michigan. We're not going to go through all of them, but you see the group of 5 teams start to slide in for the maize and blue. But good point there. Good point. Oh my goodness, Hufferbilly, I remember more about what happened 30 years ago than I remember what happened last season. There are so many players that come to mind that I can't spit their name out from last season that I'm like, I watched the dude play 10 times. Why can't I remember his name? Jason used to go to the Kickoff Classic every year. Case in point there, Hufferbilly, Kickoff Classics. You had a Penn State, Nebraska game in 83, 44-6. You had a Auburn, Miami game, 20-18 in 84. And we could go on and on. Florida State and Kansas played one year. And Ohio State and Boston College played one year. And then there was the Pigskin Classic. We saw that with Michigan, Virginia. Yeah, those were fun. August football. Well, I do appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. We had a good crowd on hand. Think about this. We do this all the time, talking college football with all of you. So join us on a regular basis. I just released Big Ten Power Rankings. We also have released the ACC, the SEC, and the Pac-12. Program rankings are coming, I promise. And again, we've got a big Tuesday night coming up here. Clemson, Ohio State 2019 debate. This is great debate month here at the Voice of College Football. We have already served up 3 remarkable debates. Pac-12, Big 12, had a Big 12 response debate, and we also broke down the 60s and 70s, the top 10 programs in college football, and who is number 1 for the 60s and 70s. So we've delivered 3 great debates. We've got more coming. The 2 that I have in my sights are Clemson, Ohio State 2019, and also Ohio State, Michigan in 2016. But hey, if you've got a great debate that you would like to see waged here at the Voice of College Football, bring it on. Let us know. Hit me up. All right. I am working on a newsletter that I would like to deliver to everyone. So be looking out for that. I'll be telling you more about that coming up very soon here at the Voice of College Football, the Voice of College Football newsletter. Get excited about that. I appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. Remember, listen to this. Hang on just a second. I had a friend the other day on Amazon. I'm on the phone with them talking about other things, and they were just mentioning that they were shopping. And I said, grab the Amazon link. I want to tell you, I want to test it out because it's my Amazon link, so I can't go through the same experience that you guys go through in shopping on Amazon. Okay. So this particular person, one of my friends, they shopped on Amazon. Okay. They used the link. And then a few days later, I was on the phone with them again, and they said, did you get paid for the Amazon purchases I made? And I said, well, I don't know. But I said, how was the shopping experience? They were like, it's exactly what I always do. It was no different. So please use the Amazon link. It is exactly the same as any other time you go on Amazon. It is exactly the same. So please grab the Amazon link in the description section. Put it somewhere where you will remember it. There is going to be a product there. It's only there because Amazon forces us to select a product. Bypass the product. Just do your regular shopping. Search for whatever you want to search for. Do whatever you want to do on Amazon. Just please use the link in the description section. Again, it does not cost you a penny. This is how you can support the channel without spending a penny. Grab the Amazon link. Do your shopping on Amazon using our link. And again, it's the same exact shopping experience. So please do that. Be so appreciative of that. All right. Thank you, everyone. We will be back here with our guys Tim and Rick on Sunday night for Trojan Conquest Live over on the USC channel. I may be popping up throughout the weekend, but definitely I'll be back Monday at 6 Eastern for the Big Ten Live show, and you can join us there. Thanks so much for being here at the Voice of College Football. We will see you next time.